Hi, everybody. Hopefully, you can hear me right now. And we are live on YouTube and live on Facebook for the fifth consecutive anti spy bill event. Thank you all so much for being here. I really appreciate it. I know we had a whole crowd of you already waiting in the YouTube chat, which was so awesome to see you all commenting before. And I did receive the questions that you wanted me to ask HA, so I will do my best. Okay, today we have with us the awesome, the amazing, the extremely popular HA Goodman. HA is a journalist. Actually, he can tell you more about himself than I can, most likely, but I can tell you that HA has been covering really contemporary political topics on his very popular YouTube channel for quite a while now. He's a pretty well-known face in the political sphere, and he's been a really great friend and supporter to Internet Party and our campaign. So I'm really, really pleased to have him here with us today. So hi, HA. Glad that you could make it.
Hello, Susie. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Oh, you're so welcome. Our team is so excited to have you here today. It's just really, really cool. So, HA, I'm going to give you about 20 minutes to kick this off. And so I would really like it if you would tell us your story, your background, how you became a journalist, how you started writing about the topics that you did, how you developed your YouTube channel and built this nearly 100,000 following that you have now. Take it away.
Well, let's see. I used to be a financial advisor for Morgan Stanley and some other firms. And then I became a high school history teacher at LA Unified. And then I started writing. And things started picking up. And then eventually, I started writing in The Hill and the Congress blog. So in the Hill publication in DC. And then that went to the Huffington Post. So then I became a contributor to The Hill. And in the Huffington Post, I've been published several hundred times. But during the election, a lot of my articles, a great many, went viral. And I started talking about Bernie Sanders when he decided to run. I was on MSNBC, CNN. I've been on RT 6 times. So that's basically it. 2014, my writing really started picking up. And before Bernie Sanders, I was really writing against counterinsurgency wars. So I wrote against the United States continually involving itself in these counterinsurgency wars like Vietnam, Iraq, Afghanistan. So I wrote a lot about that from an anti-war perspective, and also from the perspective of us continually making the same mistakes. We didn't learn anything from Vietnam, unfortunately, and we continued the same mistakes in Iraq and Afghanistan. And then after Bush, Obama then continued the same dilemma and tragedy. So I wrote about things from an anti-war perspective and also things from a kind of purely progressive vantage point. And so basically and you can, I guess, fast forward. Bernie was cheated, despite the fact that I was telling people that Clinton could not win. I was one of the few voices out there. My good friend Tim Black, who was now at the Convergence Conference with Jimmy Dore, and Draft Bernie with Nick Brana. So it's a political movement to get Bernie Sanders to join the People's Party. But Tim Black was one of the voices, but there weren't many. And when I started writing, my writing went viral, and that caused a lot of people to dislike me. Joan Walsh actually eventually told Salon to stop publishing my work. She had a big conniption fit. She didn't like the fact that I was telling the truth about Hillary Clinton. And then it's funny, I was interviewed twice by Jordan Sheridan of the Young Turks, and then there were some issues after that a year later. But a lot of people wrote hit pieces. The Daily Beast tried to contact me. I knew they would I knew they would misquote me and try to manipulate anything I said, so I didn't actually return their calls or offer any insight. Yet they still wrote a hit piece on me with the title, "Oh, he thinks he's too good for us." But there were a lot of people who basically, I mean, everything from Reddit to like these smaller online communities devoted to this kind of Democratic Party groupthink thought I was like Satan. Anyway, fast forward to what's taking place now, and my YouTube channel began growing last year. It's now at what, 86,000 almost 86,000, so around 86,000 subscribers. So, but I guess that's kind of who I am. I'll leave it at that.
AJ, for those of us who are from New Zealand and maybe not so well versed, can you really explain to us what was the difference between Bernie Sanders' platform and Hillary Clinton's platform?
Well, the difference is the primary difference has been lost upon the political culture of 2017, and even Bernie himself doesn't really has not really emphasized the differences lately. Number one, he wanted to break up banks. He wanted to reinstate Glass-Steagall. He wanted to ban fracking. He wanted to end quagmires. He used those words. And of course, he wanted to implement single payer, which Democrats now pretend that they care about, but they don't. In fact, during the primary, Hillary Clinton said it was completely unrealistic. It'll never happen. And there were other Democrats in Congress who said the same thing. They were against single payer when they actually could have they could have nominated a candidate who stood for that. So the difference when people say, well, you could have had Hillary Clinton, but sure, you could have had Hillary Clinton, who was a warmonger and a neocon, but at least she would be closer to your viewpoints. That mentality is the reason Clinton lost. Democrats don't stand for anything structural. People wanted structural change, and they wanted bold ideas. They wanted somebody to speak to them. Now, Trump won primarily because he wasn't Hillary Clinton. I wrote in 2015 that she was unelectable in The Hill, the Huffington Post Salon, and on my YouTube channel when I first started the channel. Nobody believed that. There was such a tremendous amount of groupthink because they said, well, they were running on this like 90s paradigm where if they're just a little bit better than Republicans on major issues, that's good enough. But people don't want that anymore. So the difference between Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders, there's this myth, this like online site, or there's, I side with, or these online sites say, well, their platform was 90% the same. Yeah, but Congress doesn't vote on structural issues. When was the last time Congress voted on breaking up banks, banning fracking, reinstating Glass-Steagall, ending wars? So these are structural issues. Bernie Sanders tackled structural issues. The biggest thing I loved about Bernie, which is why I wrote so much about him, was that he wanted to end quagmires. He talked about transforming a very, corrupt political environment. He raised money not through major super PACs or wealthy foreign donors or a foundation like the Clinton Foundation that 5 FBI field offices wanted to investigate, but the DOJ blocked. Bernie Sanders was relatively unknown nationally. He went from a relative unknown to universal name recognition within a year, less than a year. Clinton spent her entire life in the public eye. She spent $1.2 billion. Trump spent $600 million. And then they say, well, she got more votes. Yes, she outspent him 2-1. And then she still lost the Electoral College because people wanted bold major messages, bold messages. So the difference is structural. It's not a matter of, Clinton Clinton
They
would
wanted
have.
the hope and change, right? Hang on, bear with me.
I'm sorry?
I'm going to try. We've had a few issues with my sound in the past. Is this any better? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yay! Okay, guys, let me know if this is better than my onboard sound. I feel like people wanted the hope and change that they were promised by Obama that they never got. Is that correct?
Well, you know, I voted for Obama twice. And what happened in 2008 is that Democrats got away with selling hope and change because George W. Bush and Cheney and Rumsfeld was so corrupt and horrible and inept and evil. So you went from a serial killer or three serial killers to somebody that you felt would give you a better, won the Nobel Peace Prize. My God, first black president. He even said during a debate with McCain, he even said that I think he mentioned the Iraq War being illegal. I mean, he said things that
he was going to close Gitmo. I remember that was it. He was going to close Guantanamo Bay. Going to be the most transparent administration in presidential history.
Yeah, and he didn't close Guantanamo. He added troops to Iraq and Afghanistan. He sent us into Yemen and Syria. And he persecuted whistleblowers more so than anyone, used the Espionage Act more so than anyone, and not a peep from the left, the quote-unquote left in the United States of America. There's a viable left, there's a viable progressive movement, but it's overshadowed by gigantic public relations firms like MSNBC and the Washington Post and New York Times. And now they're co-opting and they're transforming Bernie Sanders' structural revolution into focusing on single payer, which they really don't want, and bullying and attacking people on Twitter. That's essentially without Twitter, there is no Democratic Party anymore. The Democratic Party, with the Awan scandal and the DNC, with the Clinton email scandal, they both are ongoing, with the fact that a great many people are pissed off that Bernie Sanders was cheated. The DNC fraud lawsuit that Jared and Elizabeth Beck and Nico House, all three of them, they started, and the two lawyers, Jared and Elizabeth Beck, I consider heroes, went up against the DNC. The lawsuit was only dismissed because of a technicality. The judge actually stated that, yeah, fraud was committed and the cheating took place. But there was a technicality. So, but there will be more lawsuits. I think that what took place was a theft or in broad daylight, and now very quickly people are rewriting the history books. But what's going to take place, unfortunately, is that Trump's going to win in 2020. There's really no stopping him. The Democrats are going to elect an establishment person. I was told by one of the lawyers, Jared Beck, there's 100% chance that they cheat either Bernie Sanders or Tulsi Gabbard or Nina Turner, somebody progressive. So there's no, and Trump, what people don't understand about Trump is that it's not about liking his policies. It's not about his popularity. If you put Donald Trump with his he has a unique brand. He has a unique form of communication. And the majority of the country has had enough of not only Hillary Clinton, because when I was talking about Clinton, the groupthink was strong. People didn't want to hear that Clinton was unelectable. Now they don't want to hear that.
The polls were reporting her 90% chance of victory.
Oh yeah, Nate Silver. Nate Silver, the god of polls, at 538 said that Trump. Just look at the math. Trump won't be GOP nominee. He wouldn't even become GOP nominee. And then Nate Cohn of the New York Times said 3 days before, Hillary Clinton has a solid electoral college lead. So they always backtrack and they say, oh my God, well, at least we won the popular vote. But then Nate Cohn 3 days before said there was a solid electoral college lead. Nobody thought Trump would win. Me and a couple of other people were saying that that Trump was going to defeat Clinton. I think there was a moment in time where Bernie Sanders could win. I think what took place was that they not only cheated him, they destroyed the energy and enthusiasm, passion of his movement, and now you have this kind of hybrid where you just have really angry people. You have people who are pretending now that they were always supporting Bernie, when in reality they voted for Clinton, maybe after 2 weeks of saying, "Gosh, Bernie's a good guy. Oh well, let's go with the pragmatic choice." And you have such a fracture within the Democratic Party. In 2016, Wisconsin hasn't voted for a Republican since 1984. They voted for Bill Clinton twice. That state voted for Bill Clinton and Barack Obama twice. Michigan and Pennsylvania haven't voted for a Republican since 1988. They chose Trump over Hillary, and that took place.
So you're saying people weren't voting for Trump; they were voting against Hillary Clinton.
Exactly, and what you're going to see now is you're going to see instead of Clinton being the person that the average American voter can't stand, the Democratic Party will replace Clinton. So whomever they cheat for or choose, because they're going to choose, it's not a matter, there is no Democratic primary. So that doesn't exist. The Democratic primary is a selection process by the DNC. That's why when people say, "Oh, Iche, how come you're not hating on Trump?" People can set themselves on fire because they hate Trump. It really doesn't matter. That's completely irrelevant how much hate Trump has, because people hated him before November 8, 2016. The Electoral College is what counts. And when Trump goes ahead, it's really perception versus reality. When Trump goes ahead and says, let's pray for the people who are suffering in the hurricanes. Let's go ahead and keeping America first. And these are things that people in the Rust Belt want to hear. People don't look. The average American doesn't say, "Oh my God, Paul Krugman is so right" in the New York Times, and if only finally we'll be smart enough to kick Trump out of power. No, they want people to speak to them. Democrats only focus on Russia, which never happened. The DNC was never hacked by Russia, so we know that already. And we know that from Elizabeth Voss at Disobedient Media, the Forensicator, Adam Carter, Bill Binney, veteran intelligence, VIPs, veteran intelligence professionals for sanity. So the DNC was never hacked, but they are not focusing on policies. They're only focusing on Russia, Russia, Russia. Nobody cares.
Right.
Nobody cares. Yeah. I'm sorry?
They're just pushing their narratives and not examining what it is that the people actually want.
Yeah, they're pushing their failed narratives, and they're not only they pushing their failed narratives, but they're going to lose again. And what's taking place is that instead of focusing on policies, because they don't have any really structural reforms. They don't want to break up banks. So when people say Clinton would have been better, no, she wouldn't have been better. She would not have broken up banks. She would not have reinstated Glass-Steagall. She would not have implemented single payer. She would not have ended, or at least said, "Hey, let's end these quagmires." If anything, she was advised by George W. Bush's neoconservatives.
When you say quagmires, sorry to interrupt you. Yeah. When you say quagmires, you're talking about wars that the United States gets into and then conveniently can't get out of.
Yeah, I mean, I'm talking about these counterinsurgency wars where the United States either inadvertently creates a power vacuum where there's no more dictator, or they go into an ongoing civil war. But it's like there's no end in sight, because in a counterinsurgency war, the U.S. military relies on the local population to implement U.S. national security and foreign policy objectives. But people on the ground have every incentive not to get involved with the United States of America. And so the U.S. military is caught in between rival factions, And what we do is we just stay there forever. Um, Most of half to 2/3 of all the Americans killed and wounded in Iraq and Afghanistan were the victims of IED blasts. So American soldiers are fighting IEDs. That's another hallmark of these wars. And still, from 2001 till today, things are worse throughout the Middle East. They're not better. So, but that's the thing. I mean, if you said something offensive on Twitter, and that's another thing, you would get more outrage from the left than discussing wars. And people say, well, no, I care about, wars. But then they'll say, well, Clinton was better. And they completely, miss the point. It's not about a warmonger who is pro-choice. It's about not having a warmonger.
Right. So there's a few aspects to that. There's the feminist aspect, which is what drives me nuts, is that you get people saying, well, of course I vote for Hillary Clinton, I'm a feminist. But Hillary Clinton is bombing women and children in as many countries as she can get away with it. That's not a feminist. And I think there's a quote from me currently circulating around the place saying there's no W, A, or R in the word feminist.
Yeah.
To me, the feminist movement is an anti-war movement. And anybody who attempts to co-opt it, for the purposes of war and globalization is, in my opinion, a fake feminist. Then I think, one thing I would really, just to go back, I'd like to go back through what you were saying in your opening address and just try and contextualize it for people. First of all, what is single-payer healthcare? Because we hear this term all the time, but many people don't know what it is, what it means, or what the alternative is.
Well, it's basically the government. It's basically, instead of going through a private insurance where you have to pay premiums every month, sometimes, $1,000, well over $1,000, depending on if you have a big family, and then potentially going bankrupt from. Can you see me, Susie?
I can see you fine. I can see you fine. I'm here.
You went in.
I disappear because I'm multitasking, but I'm listening to you.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And so, I will magically appear at the correct moments.
So instead of going bankrupt from the system that we have now, in the United States, you can go bankrupt from medical costs. In Canada or France, or most industrialized nations or leading countries in the world, the UK, you're not going to go bankrupt. I have a uncle in France had open heart surgery. It was like something like $150, the whole thing. So it's basically a similar model to what Canada or the UK or France has, where the government, where healthcare is a right. The Bernie Sanders always says healthcare is a right, and where you can, if you have, God forbid, cancer, or if you need open heart surgery, or some really, really expensive, thing, you're not given a cost of $100,000 or $200,000. And then, there are people who don't have health insurance. And what takes place is, let's say you break your leg, you go into the hospital. If you don't have health insurance, everyone else pays for it. And then you're stuck with, you might not pay the hospital, but then, your credit, there goes your credit, or if they come after you, there's a whole lot of, you're stuck with a bill. So that's what Bernie's plan entailed, making sure that healthcare is a right for everybody.
Healthcare is a human right. That's exactly what I was just thinking to myself.
Yeah.
And this is what the Internet Party believes, that healthcare is a human right. Yeah. The United Nations also believes that healthcare is a human right. So is education. Education is also a human right. And our students should not be leaving school with $200,000 or $300,000 worth of debt either.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you for explaining that, because we hear these terms, over and over again, but especially in New Zealand, sometimes we don't understand that single payer means public health care. So the next thing I want to ask you about is another thing that we hear about all the time is this DNC lawsuit, the DNC fraud lawsuit. And people generally accept that Hillary Clinton is very crooked, that she was, the pay for play, she was taking money from governments and then doing them favors in her role as Secretary of State. But I think a lot of New Zealanders don't know what the DNC fraud lawsuit was about, how it ties into Bernie Sanders, what the scandal really was. What are the merits of the case for the DNC lawsuit?
Well, what took place was this. There was a Democratic primary, and that we were supposed to have a fair and neutral Democratic National Committee to conduct a primary to then have candidates compete and the best candidate become nominee. So the Democratic Party could go into November 8, 2016 with somebody who could defeat Trump. The conventional wisdom, which is always wrong, especially on, from the Washington Post, the New York Times, MSNBC, and all the subsidiary data-driven polling predictors like Nate Silver and 538 and all of these people, everyone kept saying that, oh, well, Hillary Clinton was the pragmatic choice. Okay, fine. Well, what took place was throughout the primary, the more people learned about Bernie Sanders, the stronger he became, the greater name recognition, the more he surged up the polls. We were told initially that from Debbie Wasserman Schultz numerous times that the Democratic primary was the DNC would be neutral, that it was an even playing field, that they were completely impartial. What took place was we learned from WikiLeaks DNC emails and Podesta emails, mainly WikiLeaks DNC emails, that not only were they not impartial and not neutral, but they actively tried to harm Bernie Sanders and they actively supported Hillary Clinton. This is a big problem. Not only, you can look at one thing people don't talk about is the fact that Donna Brazile lost her job at CNN. CNN fired Donna Brazile based on WikiLeaks DNC emails. So there's a precedent that people actually don't talk about, which I think the world should talk about. CNN actually used WikiLeaks emails to fire an employee. But they raised about over $200 million from people, from Bernie Sanders supporters who thought the primary was neutral and impartial and fair. She did that deliberately, Debbie Wasserman Schultz, because had she told the truth, not only would Bernie Sanders supporters not give a dime, but the media would turn on the DNC. Even at that point, even with the height of the cult groupthink, people would say, well, wait a second, this is even too much for us. You mean to say that you're actually going to cheat candidates in favor of Hillary Clinton? Everyone would revolt. And what took place was Debbie Wasserman Schultz not only cheated Bernie Sanders, but she actually cheated Bernie voters and pretty much everybody who gave money to the Democratic Party. So the DNC fraud lawsuit that Jared and Elizabeth Beck battled, and their two heroes, and Nico House also was instrumental. All three of them were instrumental in the DNC fraud lawsuit. Basically, they sued. There was a class action suit against the Democratic National Committee for fraud. What took place was money exchanged hands based on a lie. Debbie Wasserman Schultz deliberately lied because had she told the truth, nobody would give a dime. So that's basically what took place.
So do we know how much money was involved?
Yeah, Bernie raised over $200 million, and that money went to the Democratic Party, and Clinton eventually raised $1.2 billion.
Billion, right?
Yeah. And so $1.2 billion lost. Trump only raised $600 million. So she outspent him 2-1 and still lost. The funny thing is that you couldn't it's almost like she lost on purpose, or it's almost like Democrats wanted to lose on purpose because the writing was on the wall. If they had just, she actually was running while the FBI, and we know now James Comey was basically working for the Democratic National Committee. The FBI was completely politicized, and James Comey knew that she deliberately and intentionally put top secret intelligence on an unencrypted server, and then outsourced those emails to cloud servers. And then I could spend forever talking about it. She deserved Espionage Act indictments. He knew that, but what he did was he's like, well, I'm just going to let her off because let's tell everybody that she's too stupid to be indicted. She didn't know what she was doing, and it was unintentional.
She's too big to fail, right? It's to me, it's the same argument as the banks. They said the banks are too big to fail, and it seems like Hillary Clinton is too big to fail. Like she's been so involved in so much corruption. She probably knows too many secrets. She probably has too much information in her head, and they just consider what I call the Clinton mafia to be too big to fail. And then on the Trump side, there's this precedent that presidents, for all of his, throw her in jail that he was saying through the campaign, no US president is going to indict, prosecute, or jail someone who was Secretary of State or someone who was their predecessor, because the precedent it would set would mean that the next president might come after Trump and throw him in jail.
Well, but this is the thing. Trump would have had to commit a crime. They don't even have a crime for Trump. So they have everything's fabricated with. I mean, Trump, this is the thing. I don't like his policies. I don't want a wall. I don't like his policies, but the truth is that he didn't commit a crime. He won. He didn't collude with Russia. James Clapper, Dianne Feinstein, Maxine Waters, whenever they're asked directly, is there any direct evidence? Adam Schiff, they don't have any direct evidence. Complete fabrication. The NSA is only moderately confident. And all of it is based on a CrowdStrike assessment that Russia hacked the DNC. We know that Russia never hacked the DNC. That never happened. And also, furthermore, the notion that because Russia hacked the DNC, and also President Obama himself said he doesn't know how WikiLeaks was able to publish the WikiLeaks DNC emails. But the notion that because we knew how corrupt Hillary Clinton was, Trump won, even if the Russian hacking nonsense was legitimate and true, even if it did happen, which it didn't happen, which never happened, that still wouldn't have accounted for Clinton not winning Iowa. She didn't even campaign. I mean, I'm sorry, she didn't win Iowa and Wisconsin. She didn't even campaign in Wisconsin. Shortly after she lost, President Obama stated in Politico, he's like, yeah, I campaigned harder than Clinton. I visited more states. I visited more places. The issue with Clinton losing and Trump and the Trump DOJ indicting Hillary Clinton, she actually did commit probably one of the greatest breaches of security in U.S. history, perhaps the biggest. She was Secretary of State for 4 years with an unencrypted private server nobody in the U.S. government had access to. Judicial Watch is an organization that really, they're like, me on steroids on this issue. So they're always going after Clinton. And there was an interrogatory where they asked the State Department, tell us who, this is in court, tell us who had access, who at the State Department or U.S. government had access to her server. The State Department said nobody at the State Department had access to her server. She had a completely closed off computer network that only she could access, and people that she chose, people that worked with her. So there's maybe around 20 people that was picked by Hillary Clinton to access. Nobody else in the U.S. government. If Bernie Sanders or Trump or anyone had that, in addition to the fact that she had top secret and special access program intelligence, the highest level designation, and she did so purely to evade Freedom of Information Act laws. But she removed their government networks that are called CIPRNet, JWICS, and then there's these facilities called SCIFs, to remove any document that's classified if you're a government official, it's a big problem. She not only found a way to circumvent these secure channels, but she never used the state.gov, and all of her emails were located outside the US government. Then she outsourced these emails at two tech firms, Platte River in Colorado and Dado in Connecticut, one of which was a cloud storage company. She did that in 2013. Okay, so check this out. In 2013, she had not deleted her 30,000 emails. So in 2013, all 60,000 were at Platte River and Dado. In 2014, she then deleted 30,000 emails. In 2015 and 2016, these emails were then retroactively classified. So
That's
then,
very interesting.
So
that it was retroactively classified, because all of the spy laws that have been passed in New Zealand have involved elements of retroactively legalizing previously illegal activity.
Exactly. Well, with Clinton, though, it wasn't, she had information born classified. So she had intelligence that didn't need to be retroactively classified as well. Then we find out she forwarded that to Anthony Weiner to print out. And then defenders.
And who was Anthony Weiner?
Well, Anthony Weiner was a congressman and a husband of Huma Abedin, and he ran for mayor of New York, but he took pictures of his private parts and sent them to this is also interesting. The New York Daily News asked him, well, how many women did you sext? And he said between 20 and 100. It's not 20, it's not 100. Well, as he was doing that, he was being forwarded classified intelligence by Hillary Clinton.
And who was Huma Abedin?
Huma Abedin is Hillary Clinton's right-hand woman. She's like Clinton's everything. And so,
where is she from?
Well, her family is from the Middle East.
Where in the Middle East?
Saudi Arabia.
Saudi Arabia.
So the interesting thing is, not only did Clinton break laws, but it's a enormous national security risk. And what took place is whistleblowers who are protected under certain laws and should be protected because they're exposing criminal behavior. James Clapper committed perjury. He lied. We found out from WikiLeaks publishing information that said James Clapper lied.
We found out from Edward Snowden.
Snowden. And so we know now that James Clapper lied. And funny, it's also John Brennan lied about spying on the Senate. So Dianne Feinstein was livid, but she didn't care that Americans were spied on.
And who was he spying on in the Senate? More broadly than just spying on Dianne Feinstein. He was spying on the Senate Intelligence Oversight Committee, who are charged with oversight over his agency.
Exactly.
And why was he spying on them? Because of the Senate torture report that had proved that America was committing torture in various black sites all around the world. So what kind of oversight is there of the intelligence agencies if the intelligence agencies are spying on the oversight committees?
Exactly. And what I like to do is, when I go ahead and explain what Clinton did in terms of criminal behavior, I want to make sure that I also explain that, because people could then say, because I know that there are Democrats and Republicans who will say, well, wait a second, whistleblowers also, disclose classified intelligence, right? But there's a difference between exposing criminal behavior and engaging in criminal behavior to hide from the American public. And that's what Clinton did. And the threat to national security was great. There was an enormous threat to national security, more so than what a whistleblower If you know what's interesting, whistleblowers actually, the information they provide to the public about criminal behavior from the government, the US government or any government, helps citizens, because citizens are the crimes of people in power are always hidden from the citizens of that country. With Clinton, she engaged in criminal behavior specifically to hide from the American public, because if the Clinton Foundation was audited, if Hillary Clinton was subjected to Freedom of Information Act laws like everybody else, we would find out things that she doesn't want people to find out. And then she deliberately and intentionally used an unencrypted server storing top secret intelligence to evade. The threat to national security is infinitely more than any whistleblower that we've seen with classified intelligence, because the whole planet has her emails. Every foreign intelligence agency has her emails. People were making such a big deal about the WikiLeaks DNC emails. There was nothing. The DNC emails weren't classified. They weren't top secret. Hillary Clinton's emails were. And furthermore, they showed us corruption within the democratic process. Instead of saying, oh, let's go ahead and fix that, it's, oh my God, how can you inform us of how corrupt we are? How dare you? This is a national security threat. Us knowing how horrible we are is a national security threat. So that's where we're at as a society.
And it did not only show corruption within the DNC or the Democratic Party, it showed abject corruption and collusion by some of the biggest names in the US mainstream media.
Oh, absolutely. Maggie Haberman is a friendly journalist that teed off stories for the Clinton campaign. You have Glenn Thrush.
Is she not now editor of the New York Times?
Is she?
I believe so.
Well, there you go. I mean, I always say you fall upwards with all this corruption. Glenn Thrush was a Politico reporter, and then now he works for the New York Times. He gave an article an article or an expose to John Podesta pre-publication and said, don't tell anyone. Of course, you know, I'm an effing hack, something like that. Like, he basically admitted that he shouldn't be doing what he did. But it's not, I mean, the collusion, CNN, the New York Times, we know, the journalists there were so many journalists. There was a journalist at Bloomberg. There's so many journalists. And then we have Donna Brazile feeding a question to debate questions to Hillary Clinton, denying it, saying it never happened, then writing an article saying, yeah, it's something else, a learning experience. Then you have Debbie Wasserman Schultz stepping down, and you have people within the DNC trying to use Bernie Sanders' religion against him. It's like never ending. It is so corrupt and never ending. And what's taken place is the shock and the trauma of Trump winning. American politics on the left is like a giant therapy session. So you have people, it's this giant therapy session. So you could tell them anything and they'll believe it. And so they hear Russia. They don't care if it's true. They don't even care if it's true. They're like, oh my God, it's Russia. They don't even take a second, even if it was Russia, which it isn't. That still wouldn't account for the fact that Hillary Clinton called black youth super predators, that she used racism against Obama in 2008. She took prison lobbyist donations. Now you hear, if it's not Russia, you hear these euphemisms. And I mean, look, white supremacy does exist. It's true. But if you want to talk about white supremacy, there's no greater example than Hillary Clinton. You want to talk about white privilege, there's no greater example than Hillary Clinton. Then there's this new euphemism called white nationalism, which is like tailor-made for the Democratic Party to get insane Twitter trolls all riled up. And what takes place is, under President Obama, you had neo-Nazis, you had Klan members marching. There was no Charlottesville. After Charlottesville, because the Russian hacking narrative was failing, you had Charlottesville. You had a poor woman who died because Terry McAuliffe, the Virginia governor, told the police not to separate the crazy right-wing or Klan or Nazi members from the Antifa and other protesters. You had a woman who died. But after Charlottesville, it's identity politics on steroids. Now you're getting people. There's a writer for Jacobin, the publication, who on Twitter, I have the screenshot, says it's good to bully people. It's good to bully racist Bernie bros like you. And he was talking to me. There are people who think Bernie Sanders supporters are racist. There are people who think Bernie Sanders is racist. There are people who think Bernie Sanders is a white supremacist. It's gone completely nuts. And on Twitter, if you're not frothing at the mouth in terms of hatred for Trump, you're like this big horrible person. So it's not a matter of winning. It's a matter of a new form of groupthink, because people are in shock. They don't want to believe that Trump was going to continue to stay in power, and they don't want to actually discuss policies. What they want to do is shift towards identity politics groupthink, because it is good for them emotionally. It doesn't help anything. It's like a giant therapy session.
There is a long history to all of these narratives. The history to the Russian narrative is that it used to be the Democrats that were being called communists. It used to be the Democrats who were maligned as being somehow affiliated with Russia. You know, the McCarthyism. The McCarthyism was not just in the United States. In New Zealand, there was, I believe, firebombing incidents at the New Zealand socialist, activist headquarters and the unions. And there was real hatred against socialism and communism, or anyone who Marxism, any of it, and has been for decades. It's just that now the world is spun on its political axis. And it's now the Democrats accusing people of being associated with Russia or being communist or whatever. It's just very hypocritical. There is a long history that ties directly to the intelligence agencies to decry people as being neo-Nazis. During Occupy, when Occupy was at its height and very strong, there was a push by the intelligence agencies to say that Occupy was neo-Nazi. The Occupy, and there was incidents of people going and spray painting swastikas about the place and it getting blamed on occupiers. And it was a tactic to try to divorce the general public, the mainstream, from the occupiers, and to try to give them create a pretext for the public no longer supporting the Occupy movement. The anonymous hacktivist movement, there was a Guardian writer who I debunked her article where she was accusing anonymous hackers of being neo-Nazis. Yeah. And yet when I went through chronologically the anonymous operations, they had OpKKK, they had all these operations they'd done, taking down neo-Nazi websites, attacking neo-Nazi groups. And yet here's this mainstream media reporter trying to tell the world that Anonymous is a neo-Nazi movement. Same thing, they were trying to take support away from the Anonymous group. When WikiLeaks started the WikiLeaks party in Australia, they, through a bizarre part of the way that the state level voting mechanisms worked in Australia, meant that WikiLeaks party ended up tacitly grouped with an Australian nationalist group that was instantly used to smear the WikiLeaks party as being neo-Nazi and fascist. Now, the David Dukes of this world are neo-Nazi fascists. They absolutely are. And there is no doubt whatsoever that the police, especially in certain areas of America, the police agencies and even the FBI have a long history of participating in, tacitly approving, supporting, protecting neo-Nazis, KKK movements. So yes, it exists, but it is an extremely convenient tool and a known tool of the deep state and the intelligence agencies to defame their opposition by somehow affiliating them with neo-Nazis. So you're right that it's completely ridiculous that progressives would be accused of neo-Nazism. You can tell who's a neo-Nazi because they are marching with a swastika flag. They're marching with a cross. I mean, the guys with their like burning torches and stuff, like, sorry, but you really do look like a lynch mob, and maybe that's not the best way to promote your movement if you don't want to be called neo-Nazi fascist. So I have very little sympathy with them if they want to, you know, chant those types of chants and undertake those types of actions. But to try to accuse millions of people of being neo-Nazis because they don't support Hillary Clinton or they don't hate on Trump enough is just completely nuts and ridiculous. I personally don't think that Trump is a Ku Klux Klan member, but I think he is on the wrong side of the class war. I think he is extremely privileged, and I think he has the conceit of the privileged. And I think he has the superiority complex of the privileged. And I don't think he loses any sleep whatsoever over certain identity groups being oppressed or suppressed by the state. He has made no secret about his love for the police forces, for the FBI. He cuddles up to them as much as he can. And they are definitely, some of them are definitely affiliated with neo-Nazi and KKK movements. But then on the other side of the coin, Hillary Clinton was cuddling up to all the intelligence agencies, and the remnants of her movement are still cuddling up to all the intelligence agencies. And the intelligence agencies are perpetuating racist wars all over this planet. So last week we talked to anti-war activist and Nobel Peace Prize nominee David Swanson. And because this racism thing had kept coming up in the previous days, I asked him, you know, what is the role of racism in war? And he said that every war is racist by default because every war oppresses a culture and a nationality with, you know, indiscriminately, completely indiscriminately. And that racism is instilled in those soldiers going into battle. It is perpetuated by the army, the military, the air force, the navy. The most common place that you will find racial slurs is amongst those troops who are being prepared to go to war and who are then perpetuating war. That war is inherently racist. So I completely agree with what you said earlier about Hillary Clinton and her racism. You cannot devastate the entire country of Libya if you have not dehumanized its population in your own eyes. And that's precisely what she did. Man, woman, and child meant no difference to her. They were Libyan, and therefore they were beneath her notice. She was achieving the ends by whatever means necessary and with total callous disregard. So we can see where the real racism is, like on a massive scale, on countrywide scales. And we can see where the accusations of racism are just being used for political expediency.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I agree with everything you said, and you know, the only thing I can say is when the narratives change so quickly, when Twitter is suddenly talking about white nationalism, but they didn't care at all that Hillary Clinton took prison lobbyist donations in 2015, almost the same amount of money as Marco Rubio. And then the fact that she helped spread the birther myth, spreading a photo of Barack Obama in African attire. I find what I see on the left is complete, and the Maggie Habermans of the world or the Glenn Thrushes of the world, they don't get the indignation and the outrage from the Twitter community that calls people on the left racist or sexist or white nationalist or whatever. They don't. You never see an establishment writer that actively hides the DNC saying, telling lawmakers don't offer policy solutions to Black Lives Matter activists. The writers and journalists who actively suppress that never get hate on Twitter. it's always the people who, in the minds of a great many, don't hate Trump enough that get this like outrage. Oh my God, how dare you? But they don't set their sights at the establishment. And that's why I think and they certainly don't. The same people who are pushing the Russia narrative and the same people who are pushing the white nationalist narrative don't give a damn about whistleblowers. And they view WikiLeaks as a threat, unfortunately. And part of that is because there's really not an anti-war movement on the left. There is, but it's completely overshadowed by the establishment and the mainstream on the left. And Julian Assange was right. There's a growing anti-war movement on the right. Unfortunately, it's just on the right now. It might not be for the same reasons as people on the left, but at least there's, whether it's an isolationist mentality, they don't want the same regime changes. But the interesting thing about the euphemisms that the left uses, which is another reason why Trump won, they're so into euphemisms. The phrase white nationalist is, there's like not a way. If I said to you, I want to have an all white colony on Mars, you would look at me like I'm crazy. Well, obviously, I look at people who say like the small, really kind of group that has no influence in U.S. politics, the crazies who are Nazi and Klan members. If they suddenly say, "Yeah, we want a white nation," it's never going to take place. Literally, the white nationalists want a white nation. They want a territory. So I debated this one guy who was like so into these terms on my channel, and he said, "Oh yes, well you're right. It's not a territory, but they occupy space on the internet." It's like, well, everybody insane. There's like a lot of insane people on the internet. What do you want? Like your whole life to revolve around what some insane person wants? So my thing is, there are certain euphemisms that are just then used to foment this kind of groupthink. And I just think that instead of structural reform in the Democratic Party and the public relations firms around the Democratic Party just focus on the same failed tactics, which is why I believe Trump is going to win in 2020. Not that I want him to win, but he's going to win. The alternative, unfortunately, is still a two-party system. So
like the two-party system is that this is the root cause of the problem here, right? And this is what I've repeatedly tried to raise. To me, it seems so obvious because let's go back to 2011. I'm forever going on about the Occupy movement, but that is because none of the issues raised by the Occupy movement have been satisfactorily resolved. None of them. So the Occupy movement said the system is broken. Both of the parties are not serving our interests. Both of the parties are corrupt. We need a new system that actually does serve us. We want to shut down the banks or break up the banks. We don't want another 2008 global financial crisis. We want free education. We want free healthcare. We want our environment not to be destroyed around us. We want action on a whole range of social issues. And instead of getting action on any of those issues, what they got was beaten, pepper sprayed, gas, shot with rubber bullets and beanie bags, mass arrested, destroyed. Really, people's lives were destroyed by the government instead of actually meaningfully confronting those issues. Now, Glenn Greenwald, who's one of my favorite journalists in the world, has made the same point that you alluded to earlier, which is that Trump was a protest vote. Trump, and this is when we said they weren't voting for Trump, they were voting against Clinton. Clinton was seen as the establishment. She was Obama's right hand. She was involved in all of these horrific things. And so they were voting against her. In Glenn Greenwald's words, the voting public was so fed up with the corruption that they just wanted to burn the system down. And that's what they did. They did it by electing Trump. So we can't say, oh, well, things would be better if Clinton was in. What we need to say is the same problems exist now, but are even worse than when the Occupy movement formed in 2,000 cities in a 2-week period in 2011. And so long as those issues remain, unaddressed, the dissent will remain, and the distrust for government will remain, and the distrust for media will remain. I can tell you that I literally, I've said this before, and it's 100% true. I became a journalist because I saw media lying about the Occupy movement, smearing the Occupy movement, not competently covering the Occupy movement or the issues, or I would never have written a single word if they were actually doing their job. And I am one of probably tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of citizen journalists around the world who risk their lives, risk everything they have to go and cover events that the mainstream media will not touch. They absolutely will not touch. So the corruption of the media has birthed the new media. The corruption of the government has birthed the dissent against the government. And in the election in 2016, there was only one way to express your dissent. That was to vote for Bernie Sanders. But then the corruption of the government took down Bernie Sanders. So then it became the only way that you could express your dissent was to vote for Trump. So I just want to move on a little bit. There's something else I'm really wanting to cover off, okay? It's like you said, it's a giant therapy session on the left. It's actually a lot worse than that. It's like people are so appalled by how quickly everything is falling to pieces now. Clinton, I firmly believe, had Clinton been elected, that there would already have been another war.
I agree.
I have zero doubts. I was in Moscow at the election. People say, you know, Russia got Trump in or whatever. In Russia, everybody thought Hillary Clinton was going to be elected. Everyone. The day of the election, we literally were feeling like tomorrow Clinton will be president, and the next day the tanks will be rolling in. Like literally, they had it sounds funny, but they had shipped 1,200 tanks to the border of Russia before the election. They had the US Army taking photographs of them holding a US flag on the Estonian-Russia border. So this was very real. People believed that Clinton was going to get in, and they believed that there was going to be war. That if Clinton got in, there was going to be war, and we were being told it's like a 90% chance that yes, she will get in. So there was no, yeah, it's okay, Trump's our guy, Trump's going to get in, everything's going to be fine. People in Russia were shocked when Trump got in. None of us were expecting Trump to get in. And then our first thought was, oh, thank fucking Christ, excuse my language, there's not going to be a war tomorrow. And it was like relief that there isn't going to be a war. It wasn't like, yeah, we've taken over the US election result and yeah, we've like meddled in this election. It was, wow, thank God there won't be tanks rolling over the border and millions of people dying like in the next 2 months. So this is what people need to understand. The consideration was never about trying to meddle in someone's election. It was about trying to not have Libya 2.0 on an epic scale, which is what was the serious risk. Yeah. But Trump's managed to not yet have a massive war, and that's not to say that there won't be one in the near future. But what he has done is basically destabilize the entire United States of America. So you had candidate A, who was ready to burn the entire world down, or candidate B, who is, I remember him saying, about being president, this is really big. This is a really big thing. And you can see that big in his world is like New York City and Washington, D.C., and to hell with everyone else. So he's basically systematically destabilizing the entire fabric of society. And then at the same time, between the dreamers and the attacking the LGBTQ and the everything else, this is what he's doing. He's going after minority group after minority group after minority group, and the whole wall thing and the blah, 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 on and on it goes. But then again, on the other side of that, once again, is the intelligence agencies. All of the heads of the US intelligence agencies signed an open letter in support of the TPP. They said that the passage of the TPP was a national security issue of critical importance, and they endorsed Hillary Clinton for president. The TPP had been 5, 6, 7 years in the planning. It had been signed in New Zealand, in Auckland. I covered all of the events against the TPP for years and years and years. It was at its final stages, about to go over the line. in New Zealand, the government had even passed laws purely to facilitate the passage of the TPP, completely against the will of the public. We had 25 towns and cities in New Zealand protesting, mass arrests, everything, you name it, we had it happen in New Zealand, trying to stop them signing this deal. So Hillary Clinton was going to be the one to sign it off and push it over, and all the intelligence agencies were going to get to do a whole bunch of stuff once that happened, because the TPP is not about trade. That is the number one fallacy. It has nothing to do with trade. It was about copyright in Hollywood. It was about information gathering and sharing and intelligence agencies. It was about global supremacy. So when Trump got in and then cancelled the TPP, first of all, we went from, yay, there's not going to be a war, to, wow, he just canned the TPP. Like, that just instantly made people around the world go, far out. This is our dreams come true. This is what we've been working for all these years. Finally, we have some sanity on this front. But it pissed off all of those intelligence agencies who had signed that open letter and who had backed and endorsed Clinton. So now those intelligence agencies only know one way. They only have one playbook as to how to take control of a country back that they've lost control of. And that is the destabilization agenda. So you see now this divide and conquer on a massive scale rolling out across America. And it absolutely tracks back to the intelligence agencies and to the Clinton camp. So this is where I talked when we were speaking with Kim, I think 2 anti-spy bills ago, we were talking with Kim, and I was saying that it's like a bipolar situation in America now. And we had, back to Occupy, we had the 99%. Now we have like the 38% and the 44% and the 13%. Like, people have been completely fractured and played off against each other. And one of the things that I'm seeing coming from the left now, and bear in mind that I'm an activist who's just advocated for and covered every leftist social issue for the last 6 years. I would be as left as anybody could possibly be. And yet, even I am being told that I'm a Trump supporter, a closet Trump supporter. I'm like secretly supporting Trump or whatever, because I was so against Hillary Clinton and because I am so anti-war. And I personally don't care who wants to start a war. I'm against anyone who wants to start a war. But I want to show you something, because this is something pretty tragic that happened in the last 2 days that I think is really indicative of how unproductive, how counterproductive some of the commentary is that's going on right now. So let me just screen share for a second and see if I can find this for you. So I sent a tweet. I sent a tweet that I had no idea would be so controversial. Prison Planet, who I loathe. I'll just get that on record. I loathe Prison Planet. Why do I loathe Prison Planet? Because Prison Planet says completely deranged things that somehow get a lot of traction. For example, that everybody on the alt-right is physically attractive and everybody on the left is heinous and ugly and fat. I mean, this is the kind of ridiculous things that this account circulates. Then there's the fact that they are rape apologists, hardcore rape apologists. You have people like Lauren Southern who try to pretend that rape doesn't even exist, when in fact it's been at epidemic levels around the world for probably for the entire history of humanity, but particularly bad in New Zealand and in other places in the West. So Prison Planet is no friend of mine. I've never circulated his work, and I was not intending to with this particular tweet. However, at the bottom of the tweet, it said, Mitch McConnell demanded no more drain the swamp talk. That was the line that I reacted to. So I didn't retweet the tweet, I just simply shared it and I made a comment. My comment was that drain the swamp is what got Trump elected. People wanted the swamp drained. They wanted to see a whole bunch of corrupt politicians go down, a whole bunch of corrupt Wall Street people and, oil people, corporations go down. They wanted it very badly because they've wanted it since 2011. They've wanted it since the Occupy movement. And they thought that finally there was a window of opportunity that it might actually happen. Obama hadn't given it to them, maybe Trump would. So I said, that's what got him elected. Pity he didn't do it. because he should have made good on his election promises, but unfortunately no presidential candidates ever seem to make good on their election promises, the majority of them anyway. I said it would have been historic if he had. So if he had got in and just done mass indictments against all these corrupt politicians, it would have been extremely historic. It would have gone down in the history books for generations to come, that there was actually some comeuppance against these corrupt figures. Well, an account that I love dearly, that I love and have circulated the information of for years and years and years and years, took that tweet completely the wrong way. What they decided is that because I used the word pity, that I was actually sympathizing with Trump. What I was doing was calling him out for not having made good on his election promises. And then they basically decided that I was becoming an apologist for Bannon, Miller, and Gawker. Now, to be honest with you, I actually don't even know who Gawker is, let alone to be an apologist for him. But as the thread goes down and down and down, I'm trying to explain that no, actually, I'm saying that what I call the Coke versus Pepsi, which is the blue versus red, it's like the two-party system that we keep railing against. I'm trying to explain that both of them only have their own class interests at heart, that they do not care about the people, that they do not meet their promises. But the conversation just goes on and on and on and on. This account, who I love, truly believed that I was somehow defending Trump, that I was somehow, secretly for Trump. And this exchange went on for 2 days. I won't go through it. But that's an account that knows me really well, that has shared my work and promoted my work for years. And when you go through my work, you see things like me backing up Julian Assange and saying, yes, Trump versus Clinton is gonorrhea versus cholera. I described Trump versus Clinton as a rapist versus the wife of a rapist. And yet people on the left want to believe that I'm like some outright closet Trump supporter, even though everything I've always said is to the contrary. And you made a comment earlier. You said to me when we were talking off camera, you're like, it's okay to support Trump if that's, you're allowed to choose and say, I support Trump. My issue is that I actually don't support Trump because I don't see him as being very different from Hillary Clinton. I see him as being a silver spoon-fed, privileged elitist. I see the photos of him with Hillary Clinton, arm in arm, smiling faces, going back decades. These people know each other. They move in the same circles. They're from the same class. They are the same breed. And so I'm never going to side with Trump over anyone, let alone over people who don't have power and don't have privilege.
Yeah, but
don't have pedigree.
But
sorry, I'll just wrap this up. But the debate has become so hysterical that just like there's people sitting there waiting to go, oh, well, you're with Russia, or oh, well, you're with Trump, or whatever. This accusing each other and judging each other and being malicious with each other, I feel sometimes like I need to say to activists I've worked with for years, why don't you run my Twitter account then? Why don't you write me an email of all the things I meant to say? Because that's what it's like. It's like we're not allowed independent thought anymore. We're not allowed to have our own opinions anymore. We just have to regurgitate whatever the approved narrative is. And that narrative is coming from the Clinton administration, whose intelligence agencies just targeted us for the last 6 years.
Well,
over to you.
Yeah, no. And that's the really sad thing about Twitter and social media and Facebook is that people who don't have to prove themselves are being accused by people who have no right to accuse anyone, especially faceless, nameless trolls. I'm not talking about, the person in your thread, but I'm saying even these just faceless internet trolls are suddenly saying you're being disloyal. These are the same people. This is the new Correct the Record. And I guess in your situation, what they see when people look at Prison Planet, or if they say, oh my God, you retweeted somebody with a frog, or, if you retweet somebody on the right or an organization on the right, then they're going to then because Twitter is like reality for a great many people. And Twitter is a place where you can quickly categorize somebody within seconds, unfortunately. And almost always that the labels that are placed upon people are always wrong. There's no nuance on Twitter. That's the problem. And the issue with what you experienced, I've experienced, oh my God, like every day. And now I just don't care. But there's certain times where I have to like, you know, take steps to address certain things, whether on social media. But the issue with Trump, Susie, that you brought up, and a lot of people bring this up, there's a remedy for Trump trying to end DACA. There's a remedy for Trump and the immigrant ban. So if you want to ensure that you still have the deferred action for childhood arrivals, or you want to ensure that Trump doesn't ban immigrants from Middle Eastern nations, well, Democrats can push again for comprehensive immigration reform. It's been since 2013. They tried, they failed, they didn't try again. They lost. Now we have Trump with Republican policies. So how do you defeat Republican policies or any ideology? You want to communicate your viewpoint policies in a manner that most Americans can say, yeah, I want to get behind that. But all they do is focus on Russia. That's why I view the DNC and the Democratic Party as a bigger threat to America than Trump, because Trump is going to he's going to communicate and he's going to try to implement conservative ideology. People forgot that there's actually a Republican Party and there are conservatives in the country. And it's like people on Twitter think it's their God-given right to have the government do exactly what they think should be done because of their version of justice or morality, when just several years back, Hillary Clinton was against gay marriage in 2013. So was President Obama. And instead of saying, well, maybe we shouldn't create this global refugee crisis, they're actually okay with neoconservatives advising Democrats. Instead of saying, hey, maybe we should go ahead and actually push for comprehensive immigration reform, it's been since 2013. They just want to focus on, oh my God, look what Trump is doing with DACA. Well, you didn't bring it. It's been from November 8th till now, pretty long time period. No discussion of the Voting Rights Act, Voting Rights Amendment that the Supreme Court gutted a very important part of it. And you'll see a media blitz on that. No discussion of immigration reform, certainly no discussion about ending wars. We're still talking about Hillary Clinton, which is why I still talk about Clinton. But I don't think you didn't do anything wrong. That's the issue. Susie, you did nothing wrong. It's just on Twitter, everything is taken out of context. And now there's this new groupthink that says, if you're not frothing at the mouth in pure hatred of Trump, there's a problem with you. But actually, that fits the DNC and Democratic Party narrative because they don't have to actually push for any immigration reform bills. They don't have to do anything in terms of stopping wars, so we don't have global refugee crisis. So then Trump doesn't ban immigrants. I mean, there's no tangible foil in terms of policies on the biggest issues to Republicans, and that's the problem. So, and then you combine that with the fact that Democrats don't even want to know of corruption within their party or within America, because when WikiLeaks comes out, whether it's Vault 7 or Podesta emails or Snowden comes out or Chelsea Manning, they don't want to know. So we're stuck in a country where now, if you take Twitter away from the Democratic Party, they don't have a party anymore. There is no Democratic Party without Twitter or social media now because they don't stand for anything. It's mainly this kind of groupthink, giant therapy.
One thing you got to give them, they are the masters of co-opting activism. The absolute masters of co-opting activism.
They co-opt the activism, and what they do is they funnel outrage, whether it's CNN and funnels down to the Young Turks, and then you have this kind of apparatus that funnels outrage right back to Hillary Clinton. So there's no alternative to Trump, really. It's Republican or Republican light with this kind of social justice groupthink that lectures people. CNN, I don't know if people know this, but people around the world should know this. They're facing a pretty big, giant racial discrimination lawsuit. CNN pontificates about race every day. And they tell people, and they have, the Trump supporter, the crazy Trump supporter. And then there's 5 people, you're so racist, da, da, da. And then they're actually facing a racial discrimination lawsuit with producers at CNN saying the most horrendous things as part of the lawsuit. I mean, so you have the white nationalists and the white supremacists and the racists and the misogynists on the left. It's just that what they do is they're good at pointing the fingers at the right and saying, we're good, they're bad. And at the end of the day, there are no tangible policies that people can kind of rally around, whether it's the Occupy movement or Bernie Sanders. Like you said, the Democrats, if they're not ambivalent, they're actively against the Green Party. So they don't want change. What they want is Republican light. And what they'll do is they'll have their little kind of like shock troops online that just kind of, hate people who really want change, hate people who love whistleblowers, hate people who want to expose corruption, and they'll kind of like try to shame them or try to attack them online. And at the end of the day, it'll all fall back to groupthink that helps Kamala Harris or the Democratic nominee. I'll say this, and I've said this before, I think the only way, because Democrats are going to lose anyway, so it's not like anything I say is going to, people don't like me. They just say that my opinions don't count for anything anyway. But I will say this, Trump is going to win again in 2020, and I think that will be the only way for the DNC and Democratic Party to be finally dismantled from its current form, because you're not going to get Joy Reid lecturing people on Twitter if Trump wins again in 2020. The paradigm is going to be completely and utterly obliterated if Trump wins in 2020, because there won't be any, hey, listen to us, it's an anomaly, we know what's going on, you're disloyal. It'll be, oh my God, what's happening? It's done. We can't do anything now. We have to rebuild. So I just think that unless Bernie Sanders becomes the Democratic nominee or somebody like Tulsi Gabbard or Nina Turner, Trump wins again. And then you have Rachel Maddow fired from MSNBC, because there's only so many, there's only so many years you can listen to Rachel Maddow about Trump's taxes and about white nationalists and all these things. It's not sustainable. This groupthink is not sustainable, especially you got to win, and like we have in American football, like, or whatever, baseball, like if you have a coach and they have like the best team and they lose, well, if they lose 1 year, it's bad. If they lose 2 years, pretty bad. 3rd year, they're out. They're going to get fired. And the same thing, Democratic Party outspends the Republican Party. They have the media. They used to have the deep state. And now with Christopher Wray and Pompeo, Trump's slowly like rustling away the deep state. So once they lose the deep state, mark my words, the media is actually going to see slowly but surely more favorable coverage of Trump in a year and a half, because they can't continue. Like, a lot of this is not just Trump. I don't like Trump's policies. It's not like I wrote 100 articles for Bernie Sanders in The Hill, The Huffington Post, and Salon because I like Trump's policies. But what's taking place is the very simple and effective way to defeat Trump is to offer better policies and to communicate them. It's simple.
And to not alienate their own support base, right? So that's what I was trying to allude to before, with me having covered and promoted and worked my ass off for predominantly leftist activism causes. Not all, because I would say that very much a lot of the privacy work I've done would fit within the libertarian movement. But predominantly all the social issues that I've worked on have been leftist. So if they can manage to take someone like me, who has given so much of my time and energy into trying to advance the world on social issues, and if they can successfully alienate me, then I hate to think what the effect is on someone who was never so invested in them in the first place.
Well, I mean, I just think that one thing I know that we're going to talk about soon. I think I have to go in about 15 minutes because the wife is texting me. But why is it that the left, more people on the left dislike WikiLeaks than on the right? And it's not only now, because people on the right during Bush didn't like, when WikiLeaks, they published material that exposed corruption in both parties, obviously. But what I think is a symptom of this horrible disease going on the left is that the mere knowledge of corruption, the mere knowledge of criminal behavior on the left, that is viewed as a threat, because there's this notion that the Republicans are just as bad or worse, when in reality, the left is actually, what's going on, well, at least in the Democratic Party, is far worse than what's going on in the Republican Party. Republicans didn't cheat Trump. The Republicans, they're like, well, where's their emails? Well, let's say people read the RNC's emails. What are they going to say? Trump won. It's not like they had a Bernie Sanders. It's not like they had a Podesta campaign. It's not like they had, a Trump Foundation that has weapons deals with Saudi Arabia and other countries, or the Trump Foundation didn't steal $10 billion from Haiti. And there were actually crimes committed by Hillary Clinton. So I mean, the thing is that there's so much smoke and mirror. There are smoke and mirrors on the left. Nobody wants structural change. On Trump's side, even though I don't like his structural change, he's offering some structural change to conservatives. The conservatives then say, hey, you know what? We've always wanted a wall. This is great. We finally have somebody. So they say, that's what they say. They say, wow, this is fantastic. We always wanted an immigrant ban. We always wanted a wall. Finally, we have somebody.
Oh, gosh.
But there's nobody on the left who will say, yeah, if I'm elected president, I will write an executive order to ban fracking. That doesn't exist on the left. It doesn't exist on the left and this is another problem. Any threat on the left is met with instant retaliation. What they did to Jill Stein is criminal. What they're doing
are you aware of that? They actually handcuffed her to a chair to prevent her from participating in the presidential debate. Internet Party actually just went to the High Court last week to try and get me included in a debate. Sure enough, still excluded. But at least I guess they physically can't at present handcuff me to a chair. They might quite like to handcuff me to a chair to stop me getting into a debate, actually. But I'm not sure. Most people I've told about this are really shocked. Jill Stein, presidential candidate for the Green Party, was shackled to a chair for 8 hours to prevent her from participating in the presidential debate.
She was shackled to a chair and they didn't say anything. And then Hillary Clinton did a shimmy like that. This dumb shimmy that was like, she probably did it 1,000 times. It was so fabricated and it was a planned thing. The New York Times, I did a kind of funny YouTube segment on this. The New York Times then wrote an article. Some guy wrote the article and they had him watch a debate with Trump without any sound. And the guy wrote it like it was a romance novel. And the way he said how she shimmied, oh my God, it was so amazing. How it was so heroic. It was nauseating. And so the thing is, like, they wouldn't let Nina Turner speak at the DNC. Okay, they wouldn't, and she was one of the most recognizable female progressive voices, one of the biggest voices for Bernie Sanders. And it, it goes on and on. Now, even Bernie Sanders, I love Bernie, but it's like every time he tries to appease the Democratic Party, well, Clinton writes a book and basically tells Bernie to F off and says that it's his fault. So it's like you can't win. It's like Bernie Sanders is the nicest person. He didn't say anything about the DNC fraud lawsuit. He didn't explain. He sided with, he said he would vote for Clinton. And I just think at the end of the day, the movement is either co-opted by the same people who quickly voted for Hillary without any problem after Bernie was cheated. I think that the crisis on the left is it's bad, and I think that it's going to take a Trump win for a complete paradigm shift to take place. I also hope that I also hope that the Trump administration pardons Julian Assange and doesn't continue what Obama started in terms of going after WikiLeaks. I think that's literally the only thing that could actually derail a Trump 2020. I think that's the only thing. If they went after WikiLeaks, it would be a constitutional crisis, because WikiLeaks is protected under the First Amendment. Publishers are protected, and everybody on the planet publishes and discusses what WikiLeaks, publishes. But other than that, I mean, you don't have to. Nobody has to prove themselves to anybody online. Whether they're loyal or not. It's complete madness. It's especially like the same people who lost are now saying you must prove your loyalty. It makes no sense.
AJ, I've just got a couple of quick questions for you, two, and then I'm going to bring our guys on because they've got questions from the audience, and then we'll let you go home to your wife and right. I know you and your baby. Why do you support WikiLeaks, and Julian Assange so much? You're obviously an avid supporter. You constantly cover updates on what's going on with WikiLeaks. What does WikiLeaks mean to you, and why do you think it's so important to cover all the time?
Well, I think WikiLeaks is really the only, when you talk about the press, or you talk about publications like the Washington Post and New York Times are supposed to be journalists. They're not supposed to be public relations firms. And WikiLeaks is the epitome of journalism. The whole point of journalism is to expose corruption, to shed a light on criminal behavior, foul play, to protect citizens from people in power or the government or organizations that are lying to citizens, that are trying to get away with corruption. At the turn of the century, we had muckrakers, Ida B. Wells or Jacob Riis or Lincoln Steffens, all these people that exposed, what life was like in tenements and, what the robber barons were doing, all these things. So they were called muckrakers because they, caused problems for people in power who wanted to hide their criminal behavior or their unethical and immoral activities. WikiLeaks is doing what these muckrakers in the turn of the century did. They're the only publication really that exposes corruption. Otherwise, you would have just the Washington Post and New York Times, whether it's the Bush administration with Iraq, they're going to push that. Or whether it's Obama with Libya, they'll push that. Whether it's Clinton winning, they'll push that. Whether it's Trump being, Satan, they'll push that. So they're public relations firms. And now they're public relations firms for the Democratic Party. They don't care about exposing truth. They care about access and they care about selling papers. That's it. They don't really care about, saving the country or protecting the country from, spying or, giving us the truth about wars. They want to actively deceive. What WikiLeaks does is shine a light on all of that corruption. So without Julian Assange, without WikiLeaks, what would we have? We'd be stuck with the Washington Post. And who wants that? Be stuck with the Washington Post your whole life, or the New York Times. It's like imagine a world where it's only the Washington Post, the New York Times, CNN, the Daily Beast, the Young Turks, and then that's it. It's like you would be in a bubble forever. You would not get coverage on things that were inconvenient to the left and the right.
I also think that actually, I believe it was Julian Assange I first heard use the term vanguard, that WikiLeaks is a vanguard. I think that WikiLeaks is pushed so far out and is such a big target, and so many resources of the deep state are assigned to combat WikiLeaks, that it creates a huge vacuum, that thousands of us independent journalists operate in that vacuum. And were WikiLeaks to be taken down, they would come after us. The deep state would come after us one by one. They would not just go, okay, we've taken care of WikiLeaks, now we're quitting our jobs. No, they would take those same resources and apply them. They'd come after everyone else, and they would just squeeze the sphere of accepted narratives, or accepted lived experiences that people are sharing. They would squeeze it and squeeze it and squeeze it until the entire media sphere was so constricted and controlled that nobody would get to have a voice anymore, unless it is the voice of the Washington Post, as you say. I've got one more question for you. I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit, actually. Would you be interested, would you commit to supporting a movement to free Julian Assange? The reason that I ask this is because there are enough people awake and grateful for the work that WikiLeaks has done, but there's no longer a concerted group of people acting to free him, to get him out of the embassy and to allow him to realize his asylum. Now, I, some time ago, would have been about probably 15 months ago, I tried to start an initiative, and it was very successful initially, but it was small. There was only a few of us who were organising it, even though it got quite a high public profile, to free Julian. It was called JA for Me. And it was the first time since I had left New Zealand that there was immediate physical present danger to my life as a result of having actively done that. So what I believe that we need is to coordinate all of the alternative media voices that are in support of WikiLeaks, and to run a huge decentralized campaign to actively free him. Because I think the day that there is 10,000 people camped outside the embassy is the day that they will no longer be able to keep him trapped there. Would you be prepared to commit to such a campaign if it existed?
I would absolutely be honored. I would absolutely be honored to do so, and I would absolutely commit. I think that Julian Assange should be free. And you just tell me, what I need to publicize and what I need to do, and I would do that. It's my pleasure. I would be honored to do so. I think that I do believe Julian Assange will be free. I do believe that day. I can see that day. And I definitely want to be part of a movement to say that I was a part of that movement, because now, times are tough. And I think that, to stay loyal to somebody who has done so much, absolutely. I would totally love it. And I would tell all my 86,000 subscribers on my YouTube channel to go ahead, and anybody. I would love that. Absolutely.
What I'm thinking, and I've just had this thought right this second, so this is the wonders of being live. Internet Party has been working with Barrett Brown and his Pursuance project. And Pursuance is a decentralized activism platform where people with no prior connection can jump on a project and work on it together. If I was to set up a Pursuance to free Julian Assange, would you help me to reach out to all the alternative media voices that support WikiLeaks, regardless of whether they're on the left or the right or the centrist, or if they don't even care about politics?
Can I tell you? I would relish first of all, I know that Tim Black, who's a great friend of mine, who has a 100,000 plus channel. He's with Nick Branner right now at the People's Party for Bernie Sanders, a big conference Tim Black would totally do it, but I relish the opportunity to work with anybody on the right because I know it would piss off so many people on the left who say don't work with people on the right, and that would make me so happy to do so, especially for a great cause. I just think that I'll say this: I think humanity needs Julian Assange free and living like a normal, human being out, to see his family.
To see sunlight.
Sunlight.
To see sunlight, to sit in the sun,
yeah. And that's a prime example also of, because I got in these dumb debates with people and they're like, you can't reach out to the right. You can't, you'll be disloyal. We'll excommunicate you. It's like, I don't care. You can excommunicate me. I don't really care. And especially I would love to reach out to anyone who could help spread the message, because the really interesting thing, Susie, one aspect of this that nobody talks about, the deep state is pretty stupid if they view Assange or WikiLeaks as a threat, because it's actually not a threat to national security at all for the people of the United States to know of corruption. That's not actually a threat to national security. So it's kind of an ego thing with the deep state. They're like, well, how did you find this? I'm so upset. But it's actually a threat to national security. What Clinton did, that actually does hurt the US military, like directly. That actually does hurt our interests directly, because you're talking about, I can go on forever, but you're talking about everything from communication with Obama to the highest level special access program intelligence beyond top secret. The whole planet has that because of Clinton's server, with no benefit of whistleblowing. So that actually is a direct threat to national security. WikiLeaks is not a threat to national security. When Pompeo says, oh, they're hostile actors, it's an ego thing, because he's pissed off that, criminal behavior, or he's pissed off the American public gets to know what the deep state is up to or what elites are up to that they're trying to hide from the public. So it's, in terms of national security, what I'm trying to say is it behooves the deep state to allow WikiLeaks to exist, because if, God forbid, we don't have Assange or WikiLeaks, and if, God forbid, something happens to Assange or WikiLeaks, then the deep state is looking at a possibility of somebody who is not, who has hatred in their heart. That's something that Pompeo and these people don't get. If you had somebody with hatred who wanted to do harm, that would actually be infinitely worse than somebody who was an organization that was altruistic, that is giving a publishing whistleblowers. You see what I mean?
Totally. I'm just talking with our team. I know we're running short on time. We've kept you way too long. If I can just keep you another 10, 15 minutes, we'll just let the audience ask you the questions, and then we'll let you go and move on.
Sure.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Such a spirited and awesome discussion, HA, and I'm so happy to have you here.
I'm happy to be here.
Please, can I have Jordan and Blake jump on the stream? You guys activate your cameras. These guys have been collating the questions from the various social media platforms that people have been asking you. And I've asked them to pick like just 5 or 6 of the best ones. And if you can just try and give like a 2 or 3 minute answer per question, would be really, really cool. I'm sure the viewers will be really grateful. Hi, Jordan.
Hey guys. Hey Susie. Hi HA.
Hi, Jordan.
Hey, thanks for your time tonight. It's muchly appreciated. So as Susie's noted, we've got a few questions to present to you today.
Oh, Jordan, you're frozen for a second. Blake, are you with us?
The first one comes from...
Go ahead, Jordan, you're good.
Am I good now?
Yep, you're good.
Oh, cool. So it comes from an independent questionnaire, and they've just asked that how do we ensure election integrity in the next elections? Do you think there needs to be implementations like election watchdogs and whatnot? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
Oh, well, unfortunately, there's no way to ensure election integrity. If anything, there won't be much integrity, especially on the Democratic side. The Democratic nominee will be chosen. The primary will be rigged. Both Republicans and Democrats will engage in underhanded and dirty tactics, but they won't call each other out because they'll both be doing the same things. So there's no way to ensure that we have a fair election because both political parties have mastered ways of cheating.
Awesome. We also had a question from the great Bruce King, and he's just asked that why has the anti-war movement on the left died down?
Because the neoconservatives from Bush's administration, when they were proven wrong about Iraq and Afghanistan, and when the world rightfully viewed them as evil and causing so much devastation and heartache and suffering and chaos and madness, then they had nowhere to go but the Democratic Party. And Hillary Clinton was always open to regime change and war. So they said, well, we're no longer employed by the Republicans. Let's see if we can make the Democrats, like, quote unquote, tougher. And now they're within the Democratic Party and they're controlling the narrative. The whole Russian narrative also is a neoconservative, emanates from neoconservative foreign policy. So that also fits into the mix. But there is no viable, strong anti-war movement on the left. There's actually a bigger one on the right. Assange was right about that.
Blake, did you have any questions you'd like to present, or you're muted?
There we go. Hey HA, we were talking earlier.
Hi Blake. Happy birthday.
Well, my birthday was actually
okay, so you told me.
Like previously, but went out tonight. So a question I see here from Independent Outsider was, do you feel paper ballots and election day watchdogs are needed to ensure election integrity? How do we ensure election integrity in the elections?
We just had that question, Blake.
Sorry.
We just Jordan just asked that one. I'm really mindful.
Short answer.
I was trying to get on.
Sorry, Blake. I'm just really mindful that there were some really big supporters of HA who asked a bunch of questions at the beginning of the YouTube that they wanted me to ask HA, and I totally failed on that because I'm scared that if I monitor the YouTube channel that it will feed back the sound as has happened previously, so I shut it whenever I'm on stream.
Well, to answer Blake's question again real quickly, it's just there's no way to ensure because both parties have mastered cheating, so they've mastered ways to get around things.
There was a question from Jenny Lynn as well that she's asked. And she's basically asked, how do we get progressives or any legit people elected into government in a rigged system?
Well, I think that's a fantastic question. I think it's this. Look, if you look at what happened to Bernie Sanders and Jill Stein, the threat wasn't posed from the right. It was actually, their campaigns were destroyed by the left. So when you look at, first of all, I can go on forever. I don't even think there's a real progressive movement in America at all anymore. I think it's completely fractured and it's turned into an internet reality for a great many people. But I think that the DNC, Democratic National Committee, has to be completely dismantled, or they have to lose credibility to the point where they say, okay, the donors, so all about like everything we talked about today, like Susie and I think most of it has to do with donors. The Democrats don't speak to Americans. They speak to very, very wealthy people who, provide, fund their campaigns. Once the donors realize that it's a lost cause, that only progressives, only a person like Bernie Sanders or Jill Stein can defeat a Republican, then a progressive candidate can win. That's the only way that'll happen.
And just lastly, Bruce King has also asked another question, just in relation to what you've mentioned prior. He's noted that you mentioned Tulsi Gabbard. Many regard her as a hope. What are your thoughts towards her?
I think Tulsi Gabbard is fantastic. I think Tulsi Gabbard is a true, anti-war candidate, perhaps even more so than Bernie Sanders. She's also a serious threat to the Democratic National Committee and to the Democratic Party. So, unfortunately, whereas a couple of months back, maybe, or a year back, I thought maybe, maybe she could possibly win the nomination in 2020. There's no way until the Democratic Party donors realize that they need a Tulsi Gabbard to unify every faction within the progressive or Democratic Party movement. They won't allow her to win. But I think she's like absolutely wonderful veteran. And I mean, when she went to Syria to speak with Assad, the logical response should have been, wow, how courageous. She's trying to prevent an ongoing civil war from continuing to kill, so many people. Instead, the Democratic Party was, oh my God, how dare you? You shouldn't have done that. So yeah, but I think she's great.
Awesome. Well, that pretty much wraps up my questions that I've got for you tonight, unless anyone else has any.
Guys, who's been on the Facebook? Because I'm sure there's dozens there, if not hundreds.
I can only do one more question, and then I gotta go because I got the.
Blake, you want to take it, or otherwise I'm going to ask one.
I hope I don't stuff this up again. John Doe, established 1998, says the intelligence agencies spy on intelligence agencies. This would suggest there are more common people pulling the strings. Who do you think they are?
I don't really understand the question.
Me neither, actually. More common people pulling the strings? I'm not really sure what they mean by that. HA, one thing I really did want to ask you that I haven't got a chance to yet, if you could answer us quickly, being that the theme is the anti-spy bill, and we're actually trying to take actions to prevent some of the abuses that are going on by these spy agencies. What experiences have you had with yourself or others who you know being targeted by the government for political opinions?
Well, I tell you, I don't really know if I'm being targeted, possibly, but I mean, I get phone calls from strange numbers, I would say once or twice a day for about over a year. And I don't even answer anymore because it's either some unethical journalist who wants to misquote me and try to destroy my life or some crazy, phone number that obviously it's, tied to somebody or some entity that doesn't like my voice. But I get, the phone numbers. Then there's the trolls online, the faceless, nameless trolls that I have to stay, I have to realize that they're just, I think it's mainly the phone numbers. Other than that, nothing. I haven't experienced what you've experienced, Susie.
Have you experienced technical interference?
Let's put it this way. My Twitter account is constantly, I'm always getting, oh, did you log on? Did you log on? So yeah. I'm just assuming that everything I write at all times, the NSA or other agency. The funny thing is too, this is really hilarious. During the past year and a half, I had the opportunity because I write for a bunch of publications. So I got on Twitter to be able to DM a bunch of people that happen to also have their own FBI investigations. So I figured that my DM messages with them speaking, they happen to be public figures and whatever. I'm sure that my communication is also intercepted, but these are it's just kind of funny. There are people on left and right who are very public, who have their own FBI probes. But I found it amusing. But I haven't experienced what you've experienced, and I haven't really. I know that
I'm happy. I'm genuinely happy to hear that.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I know that like the crazy phone calls that I get, I don't answer them; they just go straight to voicemail. I know that has something to do with it, and I know that my communication definitely is being monitored. But
do you get like the opened mail? Like, have you had like tampering with your mail or anything like that, or the white vans, the blacked out white vans outside your house?
No, I don't get the open mail, but I do get the somebody accessed your Twitter all the time.
Yeah, we had that with all of our accounts. We'd get like access from Tauranga, which is like, I don't know, 7 hours south of my city, or 5 hours south of my city, and things like this. Okay, cool. So that's good. Good to know. Thank you so much for being here today. We really appreciate it. Sorry for keeping you a bit longer.
Thank you. Thank you, Susie. It was an absolute pleasure. I want to thank everybody, Blake and Joe and everybody, Jord, Damon, everybody.
Thank you. It's been awesome.
Thank you, Susie.
Okay,
thanks so much.
Take care.
Thanks.
See ya.
Okay, guys, where's everyone else? Show me my team. Come and jump on. Who else should I make panelist? Hey, Joe.
Hey, guys. Good to see you, Damon.
Okay, so
See you too, man.
do you guys want to let people in our Discord know they can come jump on the Zoom if they want to? That was very cool. Any opportunity that we have to kick the shit out of both of the major parties makes me very happy.
US parties.
I don't believe in discriminating on that count. I think that just like with National and Labour in New Zealand, both the Republicans and the Democrats are, as I said earlier, acting in their own interests. Okay, so guys, do you have, all of you wonderful viewers out there on the various platforms, do you have questions for us before we jump in and start working on this anti-spy bill legislation? If you do, then please go ahead and ask. These guys are all on different platforms, monitoring and talking to people. Tap, 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 I can hear in the background. So one cool thing that happened in the last week is that I got to introduce some of these guys. We did some short little candidates videos. I did one with Jordan. I did one with Ben, who I don't think is here at the moment. And over the course of the next week, I'm going to interview each of them for 10 or 15 minutes so that you can get to know who our people are and what they're up to. So in New Zealand, we have a general election in 13 days' time. Which would be a bit more of a big deal if all of the parties who are standing for election had received coverage about their campaigns in the media. Unfortunately, that hasn't happened. The media have chosen between 3 and 4 and 7, depending on the outlet, parties to promote. There is, in fact, 16 parties standing in the New Zealand general election, registered political parties. Unfortunately, the media has decided that if you don't have an establishment voice, then you won't have a voice at all. Subsequently, we have been plotting away in the background to create ways that parties can have a voice. Regardless of the outcome of the election in 2 weeks' time, our party is going to continue doing these events every single Sunday night, is going to continue building the international movement and the parties around the world. and is going to continue building throughout the next 3 years. Because we don't believe that political parties should just kick into gear 6 months before an election and, kiss some babies and hang out at their local cafe, take some selfies. We actually think that movement building is something that happens 12 months a year. So everyone that is affiliated with our party has committed to sticking around for at least the next 3 years and building an amazing campaign for 2020 in New Zealand. But in the meantime, trying to continue to affect positive change, even outside of the electoral cycle. And that is something that makes me really proud. So the New Zealand media, who've done pretty much nothing to cover us or our campaign, is going to want to denounce us as being a spectacular failure on election night. So I would just like to put it out there that the only people in the world that I actually care about that are gonna vote for us in New Zealand, the only two that I would really count on is my mum and dad. I told them that if they don't vote for their own daughter on the ballot sheet, that they've got a problem. So as long as we get 2 votes, I'll be happy. But to be honest with you, I know there's a lot more people than my parents who are voting for us this election. And come 2020, there's going to be a whole lot more on top of that. So I'm really proud of what we've accomplished this year. We have taken a party that was almost like an empty shell, and we have completely reanimated it. We have the best website and design team I believe we've ever had. We have an amazing candidates team of real people, everyday, ordinary people who care and who want to make a difference. We don't just have, the quintessential politician in a business suit with the speech that somebody else wrote. I didn't write a single word that I said tonight. I just spoke from the heart. And I know HA didn't either. He was just speaking from the heart. And when you hear from these guys and our candidates, when you see the interviews I've done with them, they too are speaking from the heart. And that's how you know that we're in this for the right reasons. So you guys, is there any questions we need to answer before we move on?
I just saw one that said from Solomon Navasa. They said, Susie, I would like to know if NZ has a US type constitution.
So New Zealand does have a constitution, but it is not binding and it's not respected by the law. And this is a major issue for us. So I think if you go Wikipedia it or something, you can read about the New Zealand constitution. So we should have a binding constitution. We need one really badly. I personally think that we should crowdsource one, Iceland style. So when Iceland, jailed the bankers and kicked out their entire parliament, they crowdsourced a constitution. And I would like to see a similar initiative happen in New Zealand. I think it's really important that the people of the country determine how they would like to live and their own framework for civilization. Is there anything else you guys would like to ask me before we jump in the Etherpad? Actually, could someone please message me the link to the Etherpad so I can open it up?
Policy.ipnz.live. You've got it, Blake. Do you want a message or can you type?
I'm good. Okay, so policy. Oh, sorry.
ipnz.live. Yeah.
Cool. Okie dokie. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to open up each of the links that appears at the top section. So we're going to review the existing legislation, actual terms inside it, and then we're going to import. We talked about this last week, that this is what we'd be doing this week, is to find these problematic clauses that are in this pro-spying legislation to extract the parts that are the most dangerous and the most dangerous to human. As soon as I join, look, you guys, look, you make me blush every week, someone. Honest to God, you make me blush. So every week when I log into the Etherpad, the first message I get is, "We love you, Susie."
That's because we do, Susie.
My head is just growing. Okay, I'm going to screen share. Who would like to organize the stuff that I'm going to dump in the pad? Blake, I'll nominate you if you want to.
Do I want to?
So I'm just going to pull these clauses out, and what I want you to do is to add them to the bottom. So at the top area, we have all the links, the resources to the existing legislation. Somewhere down the bottom, we have like where we'll actually put the strike throughs to like remove these horrible lines. Let me find it. I should probably, hang on, I'll screen share so you guys don't just have to look at me all day.
I've got it.
So this is our Etherpad. So our social mods should hopefully share this link to you guys so that you can see it for yourself, not just on my screen, but you can actually be a part of it. And you can add in comments and tell me you love me and whatever else you want to do.
Slightly bigger, please, Susie.
Okay. Like this?
Yeah, that's good.
Sweet. Okay. Now, bill format. Here we go. Amendments. Schedule 1 amendments. This is where we want to put references to the specific clauses of the existing bills that we want to amend. So what I'm going to do is dump up the top here under each link, like in here. So we have the link and then we've got the description of what it is that's linked to. And under it, we're going to put dangerous bad things. And dangerous bad things are the things that exist in this legislation that we want to get rid of. So number 1 is anti-money laundering and countering financing of terrorism amendment bill. So while I could go on forever about Amy Adams, ex-communications minister. So Blake, do you just want to read through the description from the Etherpad of what this bill is for me while I grab the specific sections that we need to look at?
So line 7 also. You're probably muted if you try to.
Yeah, you're muted.
Which part am I looking at? The bottom?
No, the description of the legislation, just to explain to people what this bill is that I'm about to dismantle.
Starting from 1.
Yeah, you are looking at. Which one are you looking at right now, Suze?
I'm currently looking at the anti-money laundering and countering of terrorism funding or whatever it is bill. It's the first one at the top. So somewhere I wrote like a little paragraph there explaining what this is.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Anti-money laundering and countering financing of terrorism bill. This bill brought banks and policing together, and its provisions have been used not just against money launderers or terrorists, but against activists, journalists, and political threats to the status quo. The software run by banks is made by Palantir. The banks are considered critical infrastructure of the state.
Okay, so one of the biggest problems with this bill is that it separates banking customers into 2 classes. It's supposed to be so that I believe it's PEPs, politically exposed people. So it's supposed to apply to like politicians. It's supposed to like be like a transparency function. But what's happened is that people who are considered politically exposed because they're engaged in activism, or because they're engaged in journalism, or because some person has filed an arbitrary suspicious activity report on them, are then treated completely differently by their banks. And the banks are feeding information directly into the systems of the intelligence agencies. So I'm trying to find the PEP stuff. Right, so what do we got here? Section 10A. Section 13. This might not be fascinating viewing for you guys because it's going to take some time to dig this stuff out. But what we want to do with this act, in fact, maybe what we should do is rather than making you watch us go through the specific clauses in the legislation, what we should do is highlight the priorities for each of them. Whoop.
Do you see yourself on Nicholas's TV?
No. Am I in?
We all are.
Okay. Hold on a second. I'm going to go back to the pad. So, priorities. 1, we need to restrict the definition of a politically exposed person to provide specific protections to activists, journalists, and other non-politicians, bureaucrats related interests. 2, we need to revise the reporting mechanisms and responsibilities. So one of the things that we've that's been going on, though this has been happening under the Crimes Act, actually not under the Anti-Money Laundering and Countering Financing of Terrorism Bill, is that the police have been they've been getting the banks to provide financial data of so-called suspects without a warrant. And they've been doing it under a provision of the Crimes Act. And the provision of the Crimes Act has nothing to do with money at all. It's actually a generic clause that says, basically, if you can make a police officer's job easier, then you should do so. And under that very bland provision, they have been able to access the private data of people who they didn't have any evidence to get a warrant on. We recently discovered that this had happened to Martin Bomber Bradbury, who is a well-known New Zealand journalist, editor of the Daily Blog. He is confirmed to have had this happen to him. Also, the investigative journalist Nikki Hager is confirmed to have had this happen to him. Also, I fully intend to put in a similar request about myself because I know for a fact that that also has happened to me. Now, while I say that it's under the Crimes Act that they're making these applications to obtain this financial data, it is in fact the bank's anti-money laundering and terrorism teams who are providing the information and then working on those cases. And what was also proved by Hager and by Bradbury's case is that the banks don't just provide the information with no warrant, they then flag the customer as a politically exposed person. And it completely changes under this legislation, the way that they handle their decision-making relating to the customer and their account changes if that person is a politically exposed person. So they consider a police agency having shown interest in you, even when they didn't have a warrant or any legal basis to do so. They consider that to be to raise your threat level as a customer. And when you have an elevated threat level, then they can turn you down for loans, they can shut off your cards, they can do all kinds of things to you to make your life difficult purely on the basis of a warrantless data request having been received by a police agency. So there are real world effects. Even worse, because the banks, this specific legislation, that they call it AML, and anti-money laundering. This is all post 9/11 counter-terrorism legislation. You find almost an exact copy of this bill exists in at least all of the Western world. It's because they pass these things and then they just roll them out in country after country after country. So the systems that identify these so-called suspicious, and this is it, we need to review these systems, the automated systems and processes that are identifying suspicious transactions, and name the contractors, because suspicious transactions can be reported by a business or by a person, but they can also be, and are most commonly, flagged by a computer program. That computer program is partially AI, and is based on big data sets, and it is served by Palantir Technologies. Palantir being, of course, the people that were in the States involved in very shady dealings against people like WikiLeaks and Glenn Greenwald. Barrett Brown would have a lot to say about Palantir. Palantir take all of the big data commercial data sets, and then they get access to all of the government and intelligence databases, and then they compile all that data into one big giant database, and then they build profiles on people, citizens, and then they establish behavioral patterns. And then once that person becomes a politically exposed person or the subject of some warrantless police inquiry, then that raises their threat profile within the program, and it completely impacts your life in many ways. And of course, Palantir are serving that data internationally and across borders, and they have clientele in countries all around the world. So nobody really knows yet. It would be wonderful to one day have a whistleblower actually from inside Palantir tell us precisely what algorithms they're using and what they're doing. But they are building predictive models so that they can identify the terrorists of the future, who might actually be the bloggers of the future or the activists of the future more than the terrorists of the future. So, of course, we know from like the Panama Papers that the most large-scale money laundering on the planet happens through tax havens like New Zealand and the Maldives and, you know, a bunch of others, of course, Switzerland. That's where the big money laundering happens. It doesn't happen from an activist in their bank account. It happens with billions of dollars in a tax haven. And likewise, with the countering terrorist of the countering the financing of terrorism, we know that the financing of terrorism also takes billions of dollars. It's not some guy sending $1,000 to his uncle in, you know, Yemen at all. It's actually government supplying weapons and money in the billions of dollars. And the overarching theme that we see is that all of this legislation that's being passed is not actually being utilized against the big money launderers, i.e. the governments and you know, arms manufacturers and these types of people. And it's not being used to suppress the funding of terrorism, because the funding of the terrorism is happening across networks of governments as well. Someone raised the issue with me recently of the Bank of International Settlements. Apparently, there are international banks that their specific purpose is to exist to move billions of dollars between countries. They have their own jurisdiction. They're not subject to the jurisdiction of any country. These would be the types of entities that we would be wanting to look into if we were wanting to truly find out who is laundering the money and who is financing the terrorism. So in the meantime, since the purpose of this bill is to protect regular citizens, those are, what I can see, are the three main things that we want to achieve in relation to that act. So let's move on. Okay. These review links need to be like underneath the legislation that they relate to, rather than sitting in the anti-money laundering. Can someone please find out if this HRC review link is that in relation to the 2017 Intelligence and Security Review? If so, can you move it to a separate section, please? So let's move on to TICS. The Telecommunications Interception Capability and Security Act. This is where they basically put the onus on internet service providers in New Zealand to not only make all of their systems backdoored to the government, but then to basically do all the monitoring and reporting as well. So rather than the government using government resources, they've just like deputized workers at internet service providers across the country to basically become spies and to spy on people. So the first thing that we would want to do, priority one, I like our title, so we'll use this everywhere. Dangerous bad things. Oh, sorry.
No, that's fine.
One, ISP staff should not be performing intelligence functions. Two, ISP staff should not be required, as they are presently, the individuals who perform the functions in each ISP.
Susie, would you prefer that the GCSB delve directly into the ISP's business, or would you prefer that the staff
actually,
of the
and I'm
ISP
kind of getting
are
to that
involved?
because I feel like the bigger issue here, and this is where I'm getting to it. First, I want to extricate the ISPs from the spying, because I don't believe that that's the function of an internet service provider to perform state spying functions. And when you embed spying, responsibilities for spying and involvement in spying in corporates, in businesses, that's really, really, really dangerous. It's not supposed to be like that. Spying is supposed to happen by trained experts, you know, for very specific functions. It's not supposed to be there's a spy in every ISP. I mean, what is this, like East Germany or what? Like, how ridiculous that you would have a spy in every single ISP. Or even worse, turn them into spies. But in response to your question, what we need to take this back to is what Snowden talks about. And that is that targeted, warranted spying on an individual where there is probable cause, where it's gone before a judge and a judge has said, yes, this person is actually involved in money laundering, is actually involved in financing terrorism, then the GCSB should be able to access that person's data. They should not have wholesale access to everybody's data at all times. The entire population are not criminals, and the government should have no right to wholesale access to the entire population's data. So when we're countering mass surveillance, we have to take it back to being targeted surveillance, and that targeted surveillance has to be warranted surveillance. So firstly, ISP staff should not be performing intelligence functions. Secondly, they should not be required to obtain security clearances. Thirdly, ISPs should not be required to backdoor their networks. There's a massive security risk to have every ISP in the
So once
country.
again, I don't understand. So if ISP staff don't have security clearances, how are they meant to deal with these warranted requests?
Why would they need a clearance to do that? So how
if
do
you're
they
being
do it?
given a request, it is covered by secrecy. You need a security clearance to be able to handle that request.
Okay, so iHug on Newton Road, when it was the first, ISP in the country, if the police wanted data, and they did, there was a case of a hacker who genuinely hacked for commercial damage and for profit. I can't remember, something, his handle started with S something, can't remember. This is like, I'd guess 1995, 1996, quite a famous case. of this New Zealand hacker who did a whole bunch of malicious stuff and tried to make money off it. The police went with a warrant and got his information. And I can tell you right now that nobody in iHug had a security clearance. And they still managed to get the information. They prosecuted the guy. It was in the papers. He got sentenced, and that was that. What was broken about that model that needs to be fixed by spying bills?
I would say that if you're dealing with things that are of national security, then you don't just hand them to people without security clearances. So that is why ISP staff should have to have security clearances to deal with this kind of stuff. You're not going to hand your national security level information over to Joe Bloggs in an ISP and say, we're looking for this guy because he's wanted for, kiddie porn or terrorism or you name it, because he's not security cleared or she's not security cleared. So I don't get why this is a dangerous thing.
Handing them over to the spy agencies, and why would they need to be doing it? What is it that the ISP is doing with it?
Well, for example, if it was a case regarding myself, I would not like to see my information handled by anyone without a security clearance. I would not, under the Privacy Act, no one should be handling mine without a clear clearance of and a vetting of who they are and what they're doing with them, and known to be able to deal with that reliably.
But when you go to your doctor and he I won't use you as an example considering I'm about to talk about penile erection dysfunction. When you go to your doctor and you have some really sensitive personal conversation with him, and he types it into his little CMS, which isn't even encrypted, and it goes into the completely non-encrypted medical database, and then gets sent down to the chemist who also doesn't have an encrypted database to issue you your medication that anyone could intercept and mess with that order at any time. How is that not as sensitive as your ISP, the information your ISP has, or something like that? Do we need security clearances if the police want to get your medical information? Do we have to have a doctor that has a security clearance, because there's a national security case? No, because you would only need a security clearance if the information coming from the agency being supplied to you is something that you need to pay for, if it's secret information. But if the police agency...
Well, by its very nature, the request from the likes of the GCSB would be of a secret nature, would it not be? I mean, if it was just a police request or something, then it wouldn't be.
No, so this is what national security letters are. So a national security letter can be issued to any person on the planet. They don't have to have a security clearance. And what that letter tells you is it's illegal for you to disclose to anyone the existence of this letter. It's illegal for you to tell anyone that this information has been requested from you. But the intelligence agency is not going to supply to the ISP.
Die quietly, Nick.
Yeah, whoever that is, please knock it off. The police agency is not, or the intelligence agency is not going to supply case data to the ISP worker. All they're going to do is send them a warrant that says, this is the information we want on XYZ person. And to pull that information and supply it to the agency does not require a security clearance. So ISPs should not be required to backdoor their networks. Data exfiltration requests must be warranted unless provable emergency scenarios. I know you had some issues with the tax bill, Joe. What are the issues? What were your concerns?
Yeah, I'm subject to it.
What else is your concern?
Well, there is a code of handbook put out by the ISPs Association which covers what the ISPs in general think of it, and the
would be a great review,
ISP that I work for certainly contributed to it. So yeah, there's certainly a way of working with the bill and a way of not working with it. And yes, I think there's probably justification for all of these things that have been put in it, I probably can't comment much further.
Can you please write like the link in, find the link to the industry review and put it in here, please?
Certainly.
Thank you. Because TICS very much was the step one to enable mass surveillance in New Zealand. So by backdooring every single ISP, they were removing the resource barriers to be able to access all of that information at will. They were also establishing corporate relationships. You know that it's a two-tier system, right? So you can be interception ready or you can be interception capable. And that in one case you're just backdoored and in the other case you're proactively supplying information. So it's just completely undermined the warrant process. It's completely undermined the targeting of individuals. It's now the targeting of the entire customer base and of the entire populace and of the entire industry. So that's good. We've got 2 so far. So, and of course, all this is going to have to be ratified for adoption anyway, but this is for the purposes of the draft, is to identify what are the key issues. Right, the GCSB bill. Here's the big one. The big one. The 2013 GCSB bill retroactively legalised spying on New Zealand citizens by New Zealand spy agencies, which were chartered to never spy on New Zealand citizens. It also allowed resource and information sharing between international and domestic agencies. And it also retroactively, it was the retroactive legalisation was the most offensive part. Now, are you guys able to dig me up links to particularly the HRC and Tech Liberty reviews of the GCSB bill, which I know exist definitely out there? So, if I can get my dangerous bad things. Dangerous bad things. Is that the specific review of the legislation? Or is it just a report on GCSB and the dodgy stuff they're doing?
Just moving it down from above, since it's GCSB rather than anti-money laundering.
Oh, okay, cool. Sweet. I can't type on my pad. What's going on? My pad is broken. Okay, who else wants to write stuff under? Okay, I'll try refreshing and see if this works. Where are we? Line 65. Dangerous bad things. Great. 1, spying. Oh, okay, so really what we want to do is return to the charter responsibilities. Dangerous bad things. Deviation from charter responsibilities and restrictions. Spying on own citizens, for example. Because the whole idea is that these agencies, these international agencies, right, they're supposed to be counter espionage or whatever. They're supposed to be catching other spies, not catching some Susie in Beach Haven. They're supposed to be catching I don't know, their counterparts from other countries and whatnot. People are actually actually spies, trained, resourced spies. And monitoring what the embassies and all this kind of stuff. They're not supposed to be targeting X blogger and Y journalist and Z activist. So force them back to what they were actually founded for and prevent the mission creep, reverse the mission creep. And it really is reverse the post 9/11 mission creep. which has been a massive disservice to the entire planet. Second thing, strike retroactive application of GCSB Act. So it's a fundamental principle of law. Like, what's the point of having a law if you can not have the law after the fact and apply it to when the law did exist? Like, it makes no sense whatsoever. If you've broken a law and you've done something illegal, you can't then go, oh no, actually no, that's legal. Not just legal now. It's not just that we're legalizing it now, but we're actually legalizing it for yesterday and for the last year and the year before as well. That's totally not okay. There's no crime on the books that would ever be allowed to happen. It would just be tough bickies. Sorry, that's illegal, and you're going to pay the price regardless. Yes, we might change the law, tomorrow or next week, but you still did something illegal. And so this whole retroactive application, it is basically, it's a free pass. It's like get out of jail free card to agencies who have been breaking the law. So undo the get out of jail free card for agencies who broke the law. Not just agencies, but also the ministers in charge. Now, speaking of ministers in charge, I remember distinctly that somewhere on my Twitter account from back in 2013, 2014, is the exact wording of the provisions that says that in the GCSB Act says that the minister in charge of the GCSB, which used to be the Prime Minister John Key, could authorize any person or organization on the entire face of planet Earth to receive data from the GCSB on New Zealand citizens. Literally, like Joe Bloggs from Timbuktu, if John Key wanted to give New Zealanders data to, could do that with a wave of his pen. So we need to revoke unilateral ministerial consent, what's the right word here? Approval for New Zealanders' data being sent offshore or being supplied to persons or organizations offshore. Right. What else is in there? It's not the GCSB bill that allows them to surveil an entire city under a single warrant, is it? Trying to remember which one of the acts that is, where they can say, okay, now we're getting a warrant on Auckland, which has 2 million people in it. And actually, I wrote an article. Somebody wants the internet to become an official religion in the middle of our anti-spy bill. Yes, that is extremely cheeky and a hijack of an important discussion. So I suggest that you wait until we are making a internet as a religion bill. Actually, now I think about it, there is the Church of Copimism in the UK, which is an anti-copyright church. So you can belong to the anti-copyright religion if you want to. Go look up Church of Copimism, Kopimism. Right. For the record, I don't belong to that church. Moving along. However, I think they were fans of my work at a certain point. Moving on. Revoke ministerial approval. So, right, now we're the general warrant. So general warrant is where, and I mean, Snowden has made this point many times. The general warrants were one of the reasons for the American Revolution, because they are so anti-democratic and so against, common decency and rule of law. They're like a batch warrant under a single document. So like we can get a warrant against this town or this village or this type of people or this group of people, this subgroup of people. It is ridiculous. And what I was trying to say is if we go and look at Spinbin for a minute, and have a look at what the director of the GCSB
If it's
had
not
to say.
down.
Yeah, conveniently every time I have a stream, it's usually down. Hopefully it's there. So I analysed a speech by the director of the GCSB. And here we go, you, me, and the GCSB. Now, somewhere in here, interceptions. He reported the number of interception warrants or collection, maybe it was collection of data. Where is it? Somewhere he talks about the total number of collections. And like they had this huge number of collections, but this really small, general warrants. Okay, here we go. According to Director Hampton, there was only 7 intercepts in 2016. 7 in an entire year. But he also said that he spends 4 to 5 hours a week getting authorizations at the Beehive. So how precisely do you spend hundreds of hours a year getting authorizations for 7 warrants? This is a huge red flag. The enhanced spying powers included the ability to get a warrant not on a person, but on an entity, a provider, or a geographical location. For example, Occupy Auckland at Queen Street, whatever, 1,200 people on site. Okay, we'll get a warrant for Occupy Auckland. Never mind getting a warrant for whatever portion of the 1,200 people there.
Go off topic a little bit.
Yeah.
There was this guy who came to talk at my course who used to do some IT stuff at the warehouse group or something. And he said Spark have this sub company and they wanted to do like big data analytics on Spark customers who come to the warehouse. So they said to the warehouse, we can tell you like details about the people who come to the warehouse. Like they can tell you where they're coming from and stuff.
Right. So did you see, if you have a look on my Twitter, we'll go check out my Twitter for a minute and we look at the discussion that was happening today about Disneyland. Oh, okay. I would have to actually log into my Twitter and not Internet Party, so we'll skip that for now. Or we can cheat and search like this. So today someone was talking about exactly that. I always had a bad feeling that maybe Disney is testing grounds for this stuff. And I was having a little laugh to myself thinking, oh yeah, they're just joking. And then I looked at the link that they sent. On a recent trip to Disney World, I had an unusual experience. I rode a ride. It broke. We were evacuated. And a few minutes later, a picture got sent to them on their mobile phone about the ride that was broken they're on. So their mobile phone provider had reported to Disneyland that they were present at Disneyland. Had known which part of Disneyland they're at, and Disneyland was able to text updates to their mobile phone without them having supplied their mobile phone information to Disney. So this is pretty much exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, so this Spark venture was called Curious, Qrious. And it was not only that, like they could do it at sports stadiums too.
Right.
It was this, so having worked in public safety for the last 8 years, I can tell you, yes, this is very commonplace technology. Get with the program, folks. It's everywhere. You go down the motorway and you'll see the Bluetooth sniffers that are listening to you. You ride the train and
they have those in Christchurch.
Wi-Fi points are gathering every bit of information. You'll find out that's why Apple switched to randomizing their MAC address when they're looking for Wi-Fi hotspots because of these monitoring.
That's why Telecom, which is the biggest telco in New Zealand, which is now called Spark, which Blake was referring to, but it's why Telecom was paying people thousands of dollars to get off the 025 network onto the 0274 and GSM. Because
that was my job.
On the analog network, they could not do this to us. They had to push everyone onto digital to do it. So if we're talking about solutions, maybe analog is a bloody good one. Because personally, personally, you laugh, but and also, I mean, it wasn't many years ago that I was saying we need to go back to peer-to-peer messaging. And what do we have now? Peer-to-peer messaging networks. Because you need to not have that middleman in your communications channel. So for public safety, Joe, I can actually accept that, okay? Like, to be honest with you,
but I suppose the point is these technologies get used for evil as well.
Right, if there's a tsunami about to hit Takapuna, that is probably about the only exception where I'm actually totally fine with the security state bulk sending out text messages to people saying don't go to the beach because you'll get hit by the tsunami. That is public safety, okay? Disneyland telling you, oh, you can go on this ride now on your phone, which you never gave them the phone number for. This is not a tsunami. This is not an earthquake. This is not civil defense. This is not national security. This is not anything. This is a bloody corporation. And like Blake was just saying, they set up a subsidiary company at Spark, right, to share that information and to make use of the big data. They're doing that for money. They're not doing it because they think that warehouse customers would like to be tracked, you know. They're doing it because
that's probably why they
money for it.
Yeah,
so
that's probably why they put in these Wi-Fi access points at every train station, because they're also selling the analytics to how many people are on each train and what stops they get off on from these Wi-Fi access points.
Like even like the bus cards and everything, the transport cards, transit cards.
In Christchurch, they have the Bluetooth sniffers on poles around streets, and what they do, they pick up all the Bluetooth devices passed by, and then they pick it up somewhere else, like on another road, and then they have these LED signs with estimated times of arrivals.
Yeah, and that's exactly what it's used for in infrastructure and things. So these technologies are out there and used for commercial purposes, and they're essentially spying on you. So they should be covered by the same strong privacy protections that we're trying to build into this anti-spying bill.
That's a really good point, and they do need to, because this stuff has to happen by consent. So if Disney want to get your phone number, it should be because you've given Disney your phone number.
You'll probably find it's on the back of your ticket that you've bought, and you've already agreed to the terms and conditions by buying a ticket.
If that is the case. However, I've been to Disneyland and I sure as hell didn't have to give them my phone number.
Well, that's the point. You don't have to give them the phone number. They've already got it. They just agree that by visiting their premises, they have use of all the tech and will make use of it to your best convenience.
Jordan,
I was just going to say my family have just come back from Disneyland, and they said that when you enter into Disneyland, you have to put your left hand on this imprint thing, and it I don't know what for, but it's probably captures your data or something about you. And they just quizzed them as to why they had to do that, and it was apparently to stop children being kidnapped and stuff. But so then they challenged them and said, why aren't the kids being imprinted? Yeah.
Preemptively get your fingerprints so that the kids don't get kidnapped.
Yeah, pretty much. And that's why they didn't get. They're like, okay, the kids aren't being imprinted, but the parents are. But the fact of the matter is that they're wanting to try to keep the kids safe. So you would think that
probably
the kids
would
be.
Which Disneyland was that, Jordan?
What was that?
Which Disneyland?
I believe it was Disneyland in LA.
Oh, interesting.
So it's really interesting that you guys actually talk about that, because they've just come back in the last 3 to 4 weeks, I think.
This all also ties in, this collection of the biometric information and associating it with SIM cards all ties into what I've discovered is happening in India in the last 24 hours. But I'm going to set that aside and I'm going to save that for next week, because I'm hoping that next week we're going to have some Indian activists and techies join us and tell us about what's happening there, because it is next level scary stuff that is going to come rolling our way in New Zealand if we don't do something about it now. For sure, going to. And
I went to a indoor pool complex today in Palmerston North here, Lido. It was packed. Kids, mums and dads, people on their own, heaps of people. And of course, Spark have got the 1 gigabyte relay going on there. So, and as Susie, as you told us years ago, put a tape over your microphone, put a tape over your camera. How much video were they getting of people in their bathing suits and trunks and togs and stuff like that today? It was just unreal. I was thinking about that.
People are almost oblivious. I mean, even in Berlin, like surrounded by the top privacy activists in the world, that probably the majority of them, a few didn't have cell phones at all, the really, really awesome ones. Some of them had their cameras covered all the time, like me. But the majority of them just walked around with uncovered cameras at all times. And that shocked me because I really thought that in that community, more so than anywhere else in the world, I would find like every camera covered, every, microphones removed, et cetera, et cetera. And I didn't. And it just shows that people are really lax about it. I think if they could see one photo of themselves in their bedroom, they might completely overnight change their attitudes. But people don't take it seriously. And they also don't understand that it's not just the state that can do this.
I used to have an app on my phone.
Smash the camera tag. They was playing smash surveillance camera and post it.
I used to have an app on my phone that every time I entered my password wrong, it took a photo of me, and I got emailed all these terrible.
Oh my God, you're kidding me. Oh my God. Okay, so general warrants, getting a warrant on not a person, but an entity, provider, or geographical location. History of general warrants is terrible. Revolutionary War. From Tech Liberty. Interception warrants versus access authorizations. Okay, this is highly important. It's worth explaining the difference between interception warrants and access authorizations. An interception warrant is granted to spy on one or more people or a class of person. I mean, what does that even mean? A class of person. Okay, let's try network admin, database admin. Like what? Now that's a class of person, is it? We can just spy on every DB admin in the country? What is a class of person? How generic is that terminology?
Yeah.
It could apply to anyone. What is it? Is it Aucklanders? Is it Indians? Is it what? People between the ages of 15 and 15 and a half? What is the class of person? University students? What? What on earth is a class of person?
Is it perhaps Paula Bennett's gangsters who don't deserve human rights?
Actually, Paula would love to use this for her legislation, I'm sure, because this is exactly what it's for, is to create a class of person, right? Suspected gang members, right? Which could be God knows anyone. Okay. Communications made in one or more specific places or classes of place. So we now have one interception warrant could apply to every internet cafe in the country. Classes of place, internet cafes. One warrant, every internet cafe in the country. This is nuts. This is crazy. Communications sent from or to overseas. Since when is sending nothing more than sending something overseas cause for an interception? An access authorization allows the GCSB to access a particular or class of information infrastructure, i.e. a network, which is further defined as electromagnetic emission. So now it can even be a frequency, it doesn't even have to be a network. Communication systems and networks, information technology systems and networks, and any communications carried on, contained in, or relating to those emissions, systems, or networks. So the University of Auckland runs a distributed cluster network, right? But we just want to spy on UOA now. We can get one warrant and we can access 2,000 computers. It's done. Therefore, an interception warrant is targeted at a person or place, although the targeting can be very, very broad, whereas an access authorization allows general access to all of the information on a particular computer system, network, or phone system. So it's the machines. Access authorization is for machines. Interception warrants are for classes of place, classes of people. So how are we going to deal with this? Do we just localize the warrant? So one person, one warrant, one place, one warrant, and just remove the classes of language? Because it's too broad. It's insanely broad.
Just one person would be ideal.
when you, or one machine, right? One person or one machine. Because when you go back here, or maybe one local network, but we go back here again.
The sky's the limit, basically.
If you want to.
I mean, that's just obscene. It's just obscene to think that a class of person or a class of so occupations in New Zealand could, one warrant could have got them the ability to surveil every person in Auckland, Wellington, Hamilton, Christchurch, Dunedin, Stewart Island in 2012. It's nuts. It's completely nuts. 99.99% of those people are not involved in any crime whatsoever, but you're going to target all of them just because you can. I mean, really, it's because it's not about crime. It's actually about monitoring political opinion. That's why they love this stuff. So, remove. And is this TICS legislation that this was from, I wonder? Or was it GCSB Act? I assume it's GCSB. Yeah, it's GCSB bill. Okay, so. Restrict interception warrants and access authorizations by removing classes of persons, classes of places. Oh God, where's that thing now? Right. Okay. What else do we hate about the GCSB bill? I'm sure there's more than that. Many problems with the GCSB bill. Oh, right, God. So here we go. So the approval process for the warrants is also corrupt, funnily enough. So the only difference between warrants for spying on foreigners under this bill, under the GCSB bill, and for spying on New Zealand citizens is that if they're spying on New Zealand citizens, they have to be signed off by the Commissioner of Security Warrants and the Prime Minister. And the Prime Minister appoints the Commissioner of Security Warrants. So if he pisses off the Prime Minister, he doesn't have a job. So therefore, the Prime Minister so it's a double-edged sword. The Prime Minister can have a New Zealander targeted and then can pass the information on to any person or organisation on the face of the planet by signing his pen with his pen. So we need a new, robust and independent process for the signing off of security warrants. Okay, back to the GCSB bill. So the GCSB bill allows the GCSB to spy on a class of person, whatever on earth that means, or class of place, leaving little doubt that it in fact meets the definition of a general warrant. Right. So what this means is that the 7 interceptions that the GCSB director brags that they only had 7 interceptions in 1 year, but that it takes them 4 to 5 hours a week to get authorizations for, is because those 7 warrants are general warrants. They're not targeted warrants. So that is the solution to that mystery. Oh yeah, we've really got to go through all of this stuff at another session. So another thing that we need to do is, and this will relate to the 2016 Act, we have to stop them revoking people's passports, as activists and journalists need to be exempt from having their passports revoked. So we, the Intercept, TVNZ and Nikki Hager reported on a case from the Snowden files of a New Zealand citizen who was a pro-democracy activist, not only being targeted, spied on and raided, but also having his passport revoked. That to strip someone of citizenship is actually illegal under international law. You can't leave a person stateless, but to leave a person stateless, there needs to be a way better argument than that they were a pro-democracy activist. Oh, right. And yeah, that was his other claim, is that for every one intelligence product New Zealand generates from their 7 interception warrants a year, 99 are received from Five Eye. Okay. Right. And then the issue with that is that, as Snowden has talked about many times, is that information coming from Five Eye into New Zealand may have been effectively ordered by the New Zealand government, like a little shopping list of information that they wanted to obtain on their own citizens but couldn't legally do prior to the GCSB bill. They would simply have one of the other 4 eyes get that for them. And then they consider that to be incidental collection, that they accidentally obtained the information from the Five Eyes network rather than actively searching for it themselves. It's like a horror story, isn't it, Bruce? I can see you like nodding away. It's like people don't realize, they think like, you know, they think spying, the issue is like spying, is it good or bad? They don't think of it as like all of these like dozens of tiny like egregious liberties that have been taken by the agencies incrementally over time, and what they add up to. What they add up to is scary as hell. I mean, what now we're going to intercept Disneyland, you know, as a class of place. How many thousands of people go through there a day? And then when you add in things like the training warrants, like we were discussing previously, where they've put a provision in that says that they can spy on people for training purposes. They can conduct some surveillance operations for training purposes. Unbelievable. Why can't they spy on themselves for training? Like, honestly, like, really, why do they need to like pick on the public? All right, I think that's about it. All right, and then the government trying to, or threatening to shut down the Human Rights Commission when they disagreed with their when they disagreed with the Human Rights Commission findings on the egregious violations being legalised in the bill. So who's been spied on? Possibly you, probably me. The only ones who know for sure are the GCSB. Okay, that's the end of that. So where are we at? So I think that's sufficient amount of horror in the GCSB bill. What do we got next? The Countering Terrorist Fighters Act. So this is the one I was just talking about, where they revoked the guy's passport. Stripping, oh, hang on. Leaving a New Zealand citizen stateless. Must be. I mean, I don't think anyone should ever be left stateless. Who are they to say that? I mean, what are the implications of that? Seriously, like, to what benefit? Can anyone answer that for me? Like, under what circumstances do we need to strip someone of their citizenship? We have rapists that get to keep their citizenship. We have child rapists that get to keep their citizenship. We have mass murderers, like, Ata Moana, these types of cases. Well, he didn't survive that, but you know what I mean. Like, the most egregious crimes that are committed in New Zealand don't result in revocation of citizenship. So exactly why do we need to be stripping anybody of their nationality? Is there a valid case for stripping anybody of nationality? And if not, let's outlaw it. I'm just going to leave it as a question. Now, the Countering Terrorist Fighters Act is also where it legalised warrantless spying inside people's domestic dwelling. Oh, I've got a note backwards. Here we go.
I think Orion on
finally.
Facebook just caught up with your first question. He said, yep, there is to remove government power and jurisdiction over them.
Yeah, for the free man movement, I mean, I think they'd be pretty happy to have their citizenship revoked. And if they wish to go under common law, I'm actually entirely sympathetic with that, to be honest with you.
So
if you want to revoke your citizenship yourself, that's fine. But what I'm trying to do is prevent them from using it as a punitive measure to damage people. And that's precisely what they've been doing. So there
Yeah, anyway, go on.
Even if justification exists, activists, journalists, and other politically exposed person again, politically active persons must be non-violent politically active persons must be exempt. I still feel very strongly in my gut that we shouldn't be making anyone stateless. I mean, war makes enough people stateless as it is, effectively. Security Intelligence Act. Okay, so I've just put that in the wrong part. Intelligence and Security Act. Oh, God, right. So this is another one that yesterday a whole bunch more stuff has come up about, because now when they're manufacturing their fake identities, they might not have to go look at the cemetery and find dead kids. They can actually exfiltrate biometric data from the system in India that we have just been discussing for the last 24 hours. And that's where it starts to get really seriously scary, is that it's no longer a matter of them dressing up to look like someone. It's no longer a matter of them like getting a dead child's birth certificate. They actually can like genetically impersonate you. That is extremely crazy, insane stuff, but it's where we're heading. Okay, so I think that's probably enough for today. With this, I'll just put a note to check the international legislation regarding this. There was also stuff about this, in particular in the Canadian. That's something I haven't got to tell you guys. The Canadian Pirates have actually started their own anti-spy bill, and it's based on the latest round of anti-terrorism legislation that has been introduced in Canada, which, when I read through the tweets about it, actually we should have a quick look at it. That would be a good place to sign off. When we have a look through it, we find that the exact same provisions about this ability to manufacture and forge identity documents, blah, 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 and other materials is in the Canadian anti-spy bill. And it's a shame Kitty's not here, actually, because I would love to. I'm just going to stop sharing for a second while I dig out the link. I would love very much for her to get to directly talk to you about this initiative of them doing their own anti-spy bill, because it's pretty amazing stuff. So let's have a look at what Canada is up to. And I'm sorry we've gone a little bit late tonight, but we've made good progress. So where are we at? Right, it's against the Anti-Terrorism Act. Up the size of this. Here we go, let's see it. Canada's Anti-Terrorism Act. Make it a little bit bigger. If you are a social activist or coastal social activist and you think Canada's Anti-Terrorism Act can't impact you, think again. Main provisions include preventative detention or restricting terror suspects, banning the promotion of terrorism, allowing the public safety minister to add people to the no-fly list, and to enhance the powers of Canada's spy agency, the CSIS. That public safety stuff, Joe, I'd love to have a talk to you about public safety one day, because the stories I can tell you about the Public Safety Board at Auckland Council in Auckland, oh my lord. Public safety and surveillance of the civilian population are like this, like marriage.
Oh, yeah, well, of course. We're here to protect you. We need to know everything.
Here to protect you by spying on everything and watching you at all times, controlling every aspect of your life. You are so safe now. Okay. Who are the terrorists CDA's Anti-Terrorism Act is protecting us from? Social activists engaged in legitimate dissent. Sure enough, Canada's spy agency was watching Standing Rock. So they were spying on water protectors. And there's several references. Who are the people of Canada that they protect? Private corporations. Funnily enough, and no doubt that will come back to the critical infrastructure discussion that we were having in previous meetings, whereby the government is actually actively protecting major corporations under the claim of economic benefit. Who else are the people of Canada that they are protecting? The corrupt. WikiLeaks exposes the spies' secrets. Canadian spy secrets exposed in WikiLeaks dump. Now, that would definitely need to be unpacked at some point. I don't know much about that, but I would really like to. I'd love to know. Again, the synergies are so fascinating between the Five Eyes countries. Can we trust them to protect our democracy? Only if you think undermining democracy equals protecting it. This illegal activity was made legal with Canada's Anti-Terrorism Act. Documents reveal their secret hacking tactics, right? And sure enough, they have an arsenal of cyber weapons. This illegal activity was also made legal. Main provisions include information sharing amongst 17, and some say more than 17, federal institutions, giving police powers that would allow them to preventatively, this is the same one, preventative detention, which is just crazy. And it was passed passed with royal assent, so good old Queen of England is happy with the Commonwealth. And then a list of all the agencies that can share it. And Bill C-51 is what Bailey from Canadian Party was talking to us about. If you go back and have a look at her video from, I think, the second anti-spy bill. So C-51 bill is the Canadian equivalent of the GCSB bill. And this at Kitty Handel, she's a really cool chick. I definitely suggest checking out her stuff. Okay, I think we're pretty much going to leave it there for today. We've done really well. I'm really happy that we got to have our big Corridor to HA. It was really cool. I appreciate you being here on your birthday party night, Blake, and Joe for staying up late, and everyone else. Is there any questions or anything that members of the public want to know from us? I'm happy to accommodate. Otherwise, we're going to go and get some much deserved rest.
There was a couple of general questions earlier in the Facebook. I don't have them up at the moment, but it was just around policy and bits and pieces. I don't know if the askies are still around. But yeah, we probably just need to have a policy stream at some stage.
Yeah, we'll definitely have policy streams this week. We've also got policy rollouts this week, so it's coming. You guys, anything else? Last chance to ask us if you want to talk. Oh, thank you for the lovely messages that I'm being sent. That's very cool. Very, very cool.
Nice.
So just scrolling up a bit, seeing.
Anything in the YouTube?
I think we're all wiped. I personally am looking forward to having a break.
What is the difference between governmental
outsider reckons he asked a few.
retaliation of NZ and America? Have you felt retaliation from both governments? What's the difference?
Is he asking that of me?
I think so.
Okay, so the difference is it's not even so much a difference. There's different layers of targeting. So there's like the council hiring TCIL, Private Investigations Limited, who do dodgy stuff like try to sleep with activists and have relationships with them and just generally like put GPS trackers in your car and just generally be assholes, to be honest with you. Like filthy, scumbag, bottom-feeding assholes is how I would describe them, because I think what they do is so immoral. But at the end of the day, they're not like a hardcore spy agency. They're just like twats. Who do it for money and kicks because they, like, in my opinion, have a mental derangement. Then there is like SSI Pacific, who do the actual interception of your communications. And that's when your calls are being listened to and there's all your interactions are mic'd and recorded and all your emails and everything else are intercepted and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then there's like the cubic defense people who are target tracking, who are like, to them, you are a little dot on their screen in their software moving around your city, and they like anticipating your movements and reporting on your movements and building a profile of your life, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There's the asset tracking side. Then there is the New Zealand spies. The SIS are particularly malicious. I can tell you that for free. The SIS are the people who were caught emailing each other about how they would like to gang rape Kim.com's wife, then wife Mona.com, how they would like to plot to break up his marriage and then install an SIS spy in his house to have a relationship with him. These types of things, they are really nasty. They're the ones that will go and actively try to poison all of your relationships in the community, who will go after your children, people associated with you in your life, infiltrate your workspace, try and sabotage your career, try to financially ruin you, that kind of stuff. And then you have the GCSB's primary function, as far as I could tell, was to use Five Eye apparatus to obtain advanced things like X-keyscore, right? The private investigators didn't have access to that, where they can like type in one string or algorithm and it can like harvest all your data. But then GCSB are like a conduit to send requests and information about you out to other countries, third parties. So then on top of all of that, then you have the actual American targeting. So if you look at the WikiLeaks documents, if you look at many examples of spying by those agencies, you see that they spy on the left wing and the right wing, because what they're actually doing is their little like embassy person, their little diplomats that they have in Auckland, for example, at the consulate, they are full-time spies. Their job is to write cables, embassy cables, back to Washington, D.C. to give them the dirt on what's happening in New Zealand. So to get that dirt, they have to spy on people. So in 2014, you see David Farrar, one of my biggest critics, who's currently writing nasty articles about me on Kiwiblog at every opportunity. If you go back and look at his post from 2014, he complains about his office being broken into. He complains about his staff being infiltrated. He complains about him being monitored and surveilled. There's a famous quote, famous to me because of the irony of it. There's a famous quote where he says, "There is political espionage in New Zealand." Now, he's a right-wing blogger. He's like pro-government. And the only explanation for why he's being targeted, because no, it's not the Labour Party doing that. I can guarantee you it's not. The only explanation is that the American spies are targeting all of the parties in New Zealand because they want all of them to report back to America. And you see this in the CIA dispatch orders for France. They went after all of the parties. So they don't care whether you're left wing or you're right wing, they will spy on you anyway. But then if you get to be on a special American spy shit list, like for example, Kim is on a very high American spy shit list, where you're actually being prosecuted by the Eastern District Court of Virginia by the same people who are prosecuting Julian Assange, same people who are prosecuting Edward Snowden. That's when you get the extra special treatment. That's when they start to use things like experimental technologies on you. That's when they will start to, it's the means justifies the end justifies the means, I'm sorry. I'm tired now, I've been working ridiculous hours the last few days. The ends justifies the means, people. So they will attack you by whatever means possible. They don't care. If they can injure you or harm you, somehow they will. If you never see the inside of a courtroom because they will take you out however they can, those are the type of people I'm talking about. That is the highest level of targeting. So if you're associated with the world's biggest targets, that's what you can expect to be put through, regardless of whether you've ever committed a crime in your life. For example, I had not committed a single crime, except in their eyes, my activism against the GCSB was a crime. My support of Snowden and Kim and others was a crime to them, even though on the books it is not under international law and not under New Zealand law. So these people break the law every single day. They do it with, they're completely impervious to the law. If they were to ever be so incompetent as to be caught, it would all be covered up and hushed over because they are immune to the law. And yet the law is the pretext under which they target people. So it's like this catch-22. They claim their entire justification for their existence is to enforce the law that they break every single day in whatever fashion they choose to. So I'm not sure if that's a very nice answer to you.
No, he says thank you so much for your answer.
It's true. That is the honest to God truth, what I just told you. So that's the only way I can describe it to you, is that it's like a tier system. And you have the like local scumbags at the bottom, and then you have the like super duper high international scumbags at the top.
No.
And depending on how much you're pissed off, it depends like where you are ranked on that, or how much people that you know and associated with have. Are there any other questions for me before I have a nap, an old person's nap? Nana nap for me.
That's pretty much all I can see, because I'm searching at Internet Party since we told everyone to tag that, otherwise they might not get the questions answered.
They were asking when the next live stream was.
It's next Sunday, same time, 8 p.m. to 11 p.m. We will have more people and more awesome guests and more information and a slightly better developed Andy Spy bill each week. Tomorrow, there's some huge announcements coming up that I can't tell you anything about right now, but they will be of interest to every New Zealander and to everyone that even vaguely involved or interested in the New Zealand election. That's all I have to say right now.
Cool.
Okay.
That's probably us then, eh?
That's us. Okay, thank you guys so much. I've talked so much that my lipstick is worn off. So we know it's been a good night. Okay, haere kisa moi, you guys. It's off to bed with you. It's late and we need you tomorrow. Thank you so much for everything. Thank you to everyone who is watching. Thank you to everyone who's caring. I know this stuff is scary. I know this stuff is, you don't hear it from your TV. God knows. You sure as hell don't hear it from the other political parties either. It's taboo topics. It's things that you're not supposed to talk about, and that you probably can't talk about unless, like me, you're exiled in another country for talking about. At least in this medium, you guys are able to hear our messages and you're able to learn about this stuff because it's critically important stuff that affects, never mind the election, never mind votes. This affects our entire society. This is the future that all of us are subjected to and heading towards, and we need to do something about it no matter what. If you're feeling kind, please go and donate to us because funnily enough, we have no corporate backing, we have no corporate donations, we have no government donations, we have no nothing but the people who love and support us. Tell people about the streams, share the streams, and reach out to us anytime. You guys can put the Discord channel in. We have like a voice channel, a voice and text channel that we talk to people on all day, every day. So if you want to...
IPNZ.live/Discord.
Is it?
Yeah,
Pro?
short linked it, man.
Pro. IPNZ.live/Discord, DISCORD. If you want to come and hang out with my team, my awesome team, on a daily basis, we are there, we are accessible, and that extends to after the election. So when every other party is doing sweet F all in October and November, we will still be plugging away, trying to educate people, trying to help you guys build a better future. Okay? And helping you to do it for yourselves. Okay. Night, guys. Ka kite anō. Kia ora, New Zealand. Kia ora, world. I'm signing out. Thank you.
All right, see you all. One last gallery view of everyone on Facebook saying goodbye. And then I'm going to switch to some